Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Jersey.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah. 97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
A Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash starts now. 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform. Use the hashtag SBLive. What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Mike Gill. It's not quite a happy hour Friday, but it kind of feels like it. The Wednesday before the 4th of July. Everybody's celebrating Independence Day tomorrow. Good to have you with us on a Sports Bash Wednesday. But, hey, why don't we throw a happy hour Friday into the mix as well? We could do that at 609-403-0973. Let us know what you're having for the 4th. Going to the beach there, Josh, for the 4th of July? You got 4th of July beach plans? I see you every weekend now. You're like a total beach bum.
I'm attempting to stay away from the islands for 4th of July.
Oh, yeah. You got that. You got the crowds are coming in already.
They're flooding.
Woo, baby. So, yeah, we got a lot happening. NBA free agency kind of continuing, kind of slowed down a little bit here. I guess LeBron James has signed back there with the Lakers. No surprise there. We'll keep our eye on what else is going on with NBA free agency. The Paul George, of course, was the big move so far. The Sixers of doing their stuff. We'll see if, I am intrigued to see if Daryl Morey is now trying to, figure something out here. What can I do? Because the way I see this is, right, I see this because it feels like everything that Morey did was stuff that he kind of mapped out and planned. Like this was almost a premonition of I'll trade Harden, I'll take their draft picks, I'll go after Paul George, and I'll go get Andre Drummond. And, everybody kind of hinted at, well, Drummond, he would be a perfect addition. Well, they went and got Drummond. And, he goes and gets Eric Gordon's a guy that he had been with before in Houston. And then you get a player like Paul George. All of those things, I don't think any of the moves are shocking moves, right? We're not shocked by any of the moves that happened.
No, they're definitely not shocking at all.
So my question is there a eyebrow-raising move still left in Daryl Morey? One of the things about Morey is that he has kind of gained this reputation is he does things that are kind of not conventional. He finds ways to figure stuff out. The James Harden trade the first time. When he traded for James Harden in Houston at that time, that was kind of like an under-the-radar type of thing, like Oklahoma City, or if you remember back then, but Oklahoma City kind of put a deadline on him, and he had to make a decision on whether or not he wanted to sign that contract. And then in swoops Morey and ends up making the deal for James Harden, back at that time. And James Harden was not James Harden then, right? He was not an MVP candidate. He was not the scoring champion player here. At that time, you take a look at Harden gets traded to the Rockets, and they give up Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and Daryl Morey called Harden a foundational player. And nobody saw that at the time, right? So that move kind of came out of right field. So the Thunder could not get an extension with Harden, and that's where Morey swoops in and got his franchise player for a decade there, for the most part, a little less than a decade. So I guess the question in my mind is there that player that's out there right now that's under the radar, that's in a similar situation where James Harden was? Now, we know that Brandon Ingram has a contract situation. Does that work? Is there somebody else out there? We talked yesterday with Keith Smith about DeMar DeRozan. Is that a possibility? Are there possibilities that can emerge that we're not thinking of? And that's where, to me, is the most intriguing part about the next 72 hours here, right? The next 72 hours, maybe longer, I don't know. There's still a lot of free agents out there that are kind of now in that, like, hey, the cap space is all eaten up. No one really has cap space left. So anything that happens now is player has to say, I'll take less money, right?
Right.
Team has to get creative to create
Mid-level exceptions, veteran exceptions, trade exceptions.
Right. Or team has to get creative and create sign and trade, that kind of avenue.
Really quick, for example, there's been the talk about the Sixers are talking with the Warriors about doing a sign and trade so Buddy Hield can go to the Warriors. Well, what if the Sixers and Warriors get a third team involved?
I've actually seen that there's a possibility of 5 teams being involved in that trade just to try to make it all work.
I can totally see that.
Well, Daryl Morey, that's what I'm talking about, though, is do the Sixers, can they find a partner to say, hey, we've got all these free agents, Buddy Hield, Robert Covington, Kyle Lowry. I don't think there's a lot of interest in those guys, but Paul Reed is a big one. Is Daryl Morey working the phones for something under the radar that they can add to this team that's not a star player, but it's just that right player that fits and kind of pulls it all together? Like I've seen yesterday, the Dorian Finney-Smith's name been mentioned.
Right.
Reggie Bullock's name been mentioned. And I don't think those are the kind of names that are going to excite a lot of fans. Caleb Martin's a guy that I think I would be a fan of getting Caleb Martin. I think he probably wants a little too much money. But where can he get that money?
Right.
I heard that he's asking for like $20 million. Nobody has $20 million of cap space available at this point. So you got to get creative at this time of free agency. So how many people out there, okay, how many people out there think that Daryl Morey and the Sixers still have another move left in them? And it's a move that, it's not the big guy. It's not, and that guy's not out there, okay? Let's be honest. That guy's not out there. But that it's a move that you're saying, man, that's a good one. That's a good one there. And that really just made me go from, hey, they have these 3 stars to now they have a complete team. Because I still think this team is not a complete team. They still need I don't want to say like a glue guy. They just need that guy to kind of pull it all together. And I'm interested to see if Daryl Morey can make that happen. Because so far, I think even the biggest Daryl Morey hater has to acknowledge that they have. Now, you might say these moves don't work out. They're not great moves, yada, yada. But you have to say, hey, he had a plan, and he made the plan work. And it's not, Paul George, you might not have won a championship, but you got the best free agent available on the market. You went out and got a tremendous need in the backup center, and you went and got a high-volume three-point shooter on a team that really kind of lacked that player. They went and got 3 things that they really needed. Are they the best team in the league? Probably not. But you can't say that he did nothing.
I would also say, Mike, that we got to remember also, he doesn't have to make a move today. He can make a move 2 months from now, and it could be the move. You mentioned yesterday about how Drew Holiday wasn't acquired until almost the beginning of the season, basically, for the Celtics. James Harden wasn't traded in July last year. So there's a possibility that this whole find one more player or 2 or 3 or 5 could take a while.
Yeah. The other thing with Morey that I'm intrigued by, when you think about what can Daryl Morey do to improve this team, right? He has these draft picks, okay? The Sixers have kind of like this chest of picks that they got in the James Harden deal. Can he use one of those, obviously, at the trade deadline? And is that a better move to just – the problem is with this right now is I don't know that they have enough players to get – like they don't have a start. They have to add some more players. So who can they find at the veterans minimum to kind of get them off the ground and start things off? But those draft picks, could they be the springboard to make this team at the trade deadline, you're thinking about free agency next year, right? And that's where you have to look at NBA free agency 2025. I know you're starting to look way ahead, but you start to look at that list and say, hey, is there a guy on that list that we kind of can say he's the free agent on the bad team, and that if we just hold out, we can use draft capital and get him? Now, Lauri Markkanen would be one of those guys. He's a free agent after next season, so you could possibly hope that and Brandon Ingram is another one of those
Correct.
guys. But are there any of those guys that would emerge that it makes more sense to hold on to your draft capital and try to make a play for them at the deadline?
It's certainly worth having the conversation about. You mentioned Ingram, you mentioned Markkanen. Aaron Gordon is a name on the spot track list. Bojan Bogdanovic, he's on this list.
I got Jimmy Butler's on that list too.
Yeah, well, I was trying to skip over the players that we weren't really sure what is going on with them, kind of deal. Like LeBron's on the list, but I'm not putting him in the conversation. He's got no trade clause. So, I mean, Kyrie Irving is on this list. I don't expect him to get traded. So I'm trying to move down the list a little bit here. But that's the question, Mike. Who do you really want to give up your draft capital for some of these guys? And I think that is where you have to wonder, are we maybe holding on to the capital for maybe something that we don't even foresee right now? Because maybe it's not a guy who's going to be a free agent coming up. Maybe it's somebody who just they can find a way to pry them away from a team kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think one of the things is you have this draft capital, and one of the things you kind of wait for is what happens at the trade deadline, who's in the race, who's out of the race, who is, looking to. And I wonder, because you have the draft capital, last year you got beat to OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam by the Knicks and the Pacers. Do the Sixers get aggressive earlier this year because they have the extra draft? They didn't have that extra draft capital. They got it before right when the season. They were like 4 games.
Well, they were in a weird spot because when Siakam was acquired and Anunoby was acquired, that was before Embiid got injured, and you kind of felt with the way the team was going, you were like, hey, we can wait to the deadline. We can just kind of figure this out. And then Embiid gets injured, and then we're all screaming, why didn't you make a move sooner? Because nobody could have foreseen Kuminga falling on Embiid's knee. I mean, it was a fluke thing.
No, but I'm talking about those teams went out and targeted free agents to get them under their umbrella so that they had the first negotiations with, like, Pascal Siakam never made it to free agency because the Pacers had that window to bring him back.
Correct.
So did the Sixers use their draft capital early this year to go after that player? Let's say 20 games into the year, the Charlotte Hornets aren't any good, and I'm just using a random team as an example. Utah isn't very good, and you see right off the bat, hey, this team is not what they hoped. Let's make the call now, get Markkanen in here, get him under, like those kind of things. So that's where I'm wondering if Morey has a plan of, you know what, my next move is in season. Now, he's got to finish filling out this roster, no question about it. Maybe they bring back KJ Martin, and you might not be excited about that, but, he's a guy that can play the 4 a little bit. He gets a bunch of rebounds. He's an energy guy. You're hoping that, hey, I don't need KJ Martin to score a lot. Just get me rebounds, play good defense, be a scrapper, be an energy guy. I got Joel Embiid. I got Tyrese Maxey. I got Paul George. Eric Gordon can be a bucket off the bench. Kelly Oubre's a guy that can score. I got 5-6 guys that can put the ball in the basket. I need a KJ Martin just to be the energy guy, get me the steal, get me the rebound, tip me a pass, all that kind of stuff. So can I get by 20 games of the season if he's part of my starting rotation with that other group of guys that I just mentioned? Probably. You probably can. And that's why I'm wondering, is Morey either A, trying to, does he like the field of players that are available to him right now? Or does he say, you know what, I'll hold off and wait until that next group of guys become available, in season, much like Siakam, much like OG Anunoby were last year.
Or maybe he does both. Maybe he's a guy who says, look, I'm going to do something now and I'm going to do something later. Because
Well, you have about 10 million, a little under, about 9 point some million.
Yeah.
I got to ask Keith Smith, or go to Keith Smith. I think Twitter has the
breakdown?
the how much salary everybody has left.
Well, still, the larger point is that they're going to be trading Buddy Hield. So that move is incoming. And you mentioned how they get all these teams involved. There are money to be spent on free agents. He could make other trades as well, as you mentioned. You know, there's speculation that the DeJounte Murray to New Orleans deal could be expanded as well. There's speculation that the Klay Thompson to the Mavs deal could be expanded. There's speculation that there's I believe it's Miles Bridges could be going to the Clippers, right, in a sign and trade deal. What if they expand a deal? So there's opportunities out there to get real creative, and Daryl Morey maybe to put his hand in multiple scenarios.
Yeah, this was from Shams earlier. The Golden State's in serious talks on a sign and trade to acquire Buddy Hield. The Warriors and Sixers have been in deep discussions working to finalize the deal for one of the NBA's best three-point shooters. Well, I don't know if he's one of the NBA's best three-point shooters, but Buddy Hield's one of those guys that Buddy Hield's his biggest issue was he was a college superstar, and he came into the league was just a good player, not a great player.
Correct.
And it's like this name Buddy Hield has been talked about now. He's been in the league for a while, and now he's at the point where he's kind of just is what he is. So if the Sixers can get something for him, great. We'll see how that all works out. Kyle Anderson is a name that Keith mentioned on the show yesterday. He got a 3-year, $27 million deal to go to the Warriors. So that's a guy that Philadelphia, probably, wasn't able to get, but he's now off the table. When you take a look at salary cap space right now, the Sixers are about $9 million, a little bit over $9 million in salary cap space. So they're not bringing in a guy that I think is going to excite people all that much.
Part of the reason why people are bringing up the Buddy Hield is because the stat that came out from StatMuse last night, Mike, most three-pointers made per game all time in NBA history. Steph is 1, Klay and Dame are tied for 2, Buddy Hield is 3.
He's been a very good shooter, no question.
He just wasn't very good here.
The Sixers have $9.2 million of cap space left. So there's not a whole heck of a lot they can do exciting-wise, right? Now, can they find – remember, last year, Daryl Morey was able to find Kelly Oubre.
Yep.
Who's Kelly Oubre out there right now? Who's that guy? As we are at day 3 or 4, I guess now, NBA free agency opened on Sunday.
Right.
So the best available free agents, this is from Keith Smith, who put this out.
I have the full list from Spot Track open in front of me too. So
well, he has the top 5 guys at each position.
Gotcha.
He just posted this about half hour ago. So if you're needing a point guard, which I think this team could use a backup ball handler, Tyrus Jones, Markelle Fultz, Kyle Lowry, Patrick Beverley, Spencer Dinwiddie's a guy that I would have interest in. I do like Dinwiddie. I've always kind of thought that now he's been hurt a lot in recent years.
I think Tyus Jones is interesting because he's probably an inexpensive player who you're not asking him to come in there and be this, elite player, but he's someone who, you can say, hey, go give Maxey a breather for, 5-8 minutes, and he's a guy who could be a bit of a microwave scorer.
Yeah, and Dinwiddie is a guy that, outside of the injury issues that he's had, he was very good in Brooklyn. I mean, there was a time in Brooklyn where he was like their top, scoring guard, 16. In Dallas, he scored 17. There was a time, though, in Brooklyn, I think it was like the year the Sixers played them in the playoffs, he was a 20-point-a-game scorer.
Yeah.
Last year for Brooklyn, before he got traded to the Lakers, he was scoring like 13 a night. Not a guy that I think monetarily I'm interested to see what he would get. But of that group, obviously Fultz has had his issues. I don't think that he would be a guy. But Beverley, I'm not all that interested in bringing Pat
I'm out on
Beverley
Beverley.
back. Kyle Lowry, it doesn't do a whole heck of a lot for me. I guess you could do worse. My problem with Lowry is Nurse so married to him in terms of if he's here, I have to play him.
Yeah, Kyle Lowry is turning into the guy that you don't want on the Sixers because Nick Nurse is going to play him more than he should because Nick Nurse trusts him too much.
Let's see. What else does Keith have here? Shooting guards, Buddy Hield, Gary Trent, Beasley, Luke Kennard, Alec Burks. Those are all, and I don't really know that these Sixers need to go down that road. They've got Eric Gordon.
Right. Oubre,
and they drafted the McCain kid.
Right.
So you're hoping that he can get 12 to 15
but
minutes.
Maybe you want a bigger guy than Gordon and McCain. So maybe a guy like a Trent Jr. or a Beasley would be interesting for depth purposes.
Possible. If you're saying you want a veteran, bigger guy, but again, like you got Oubre, you've got McCain. I'm trying to think if there's somebody else because they don't have. Ricky Council is another guy that kind of is that kind of off guard wing type of player there. DeRozan, Caleb Martin, Isaac Okoro, Sadiq Bey, those guys there, kind of interested in all of them. The DeRozan thing I talked about yesterday, I just don't want to go down the road of another veteran player where you get excited like, we got DeRozan, we got Paul George. You know, it's like it feels like the team that signs all the old guys and like halfway into the year, like this season turned into a mess.
Right.
So I kind of would be like get pause with DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah, I'm not per se looking at DeMar DeRozan, but I think Sadiq Bey is interesting because he's an athletic guy who can be a bit of a matchup question, play at least both ways a little bit. He can be a productive player.
Honestly, I like Caleb Martin a lot. I just think he's going to want too much money.
Yeah, the money thing is what scares me off.
Isaac Okoro is another guy that I like a lot. I think he would be a really good fit on this team. He shoots the three. And they're all guys that, like, they don't have to be scorers. They can score, like, 10 points a game. They do their thing. They kind of get the tip ball, the dirty work, the hustlers. I think Isaac Okoro would be good there. Caleb Martin would be a really good guy in that spot. I think Caleb Martin and by the way, he's coming from where? Miami. So that's taking a guy from that team and hurting them a little bit. I think Caleb Martin, if the money could work out there, he would be a guy that I think that would be a good fit. I mean, he's a little small for like a 4, but he could probably play the 4. He grabs rebounds, 27 minutes a game. He grabbed like 5 rebounds, 10 points. Not a great 3-point shooter, but I think Caleb Martin would be a good fit. Good fit. The power forwards that are left over. Well, Miles Bridges, I think, is too expensive. Plus, he's got some checkered past.
It also looks like he's going to the Clippers. So,
Precious Achiuwa.
He's interesting. He's a grinder. Doesn't need a bunch of shots. He can just go out there, play some defense, get rebounds.
Played in the series against the Sixers with the Knicks. Hayward Highsmith. Now, Keith Pompey reported earlier today that the Sixers are looking at Highsmith. He was with the Sixers back in the G League and didn't really get a very good opportunity here.
Right.
But on that Heat team, he was a productive player. I mean, 20 minutes a game. He scored 6 points. He grabbed 3 rebounds. He's 40% from 3. He's kind of like, hey, I'm a grinder. I've persevered and made it through. I'm becoming an NBA. He was a G League guy that kind of worked his way up to being an NBA guy that might be able to get some minutes. We'll see. But that group there, Jay Crowder, I mean, man, Jay Crowder, I feel like has been around forever.
I wouldn't mind Jay Crowder just if you tell him, look, you're going to play about 12 minutes a game. You're going to go out there. You're going to, fight for some loose balls, get some rebounds, maybe hit a 3 or 2 from the corner and go to the bench and, be a veteran on this team.
Yeah, how long has he been around? I mean, last year, where was he, in Milwaukee last year? He played with the Bucks. I know he was with Phoenix before that. I guess he was with the Bucks last year, if memory serves. But he's been bouncing all over the place. And the center spot, Saric, Daniel Tice, his name's been thrown out there. How about Mike Muscala? You interested in him?
It would be a full circle moment, wouldn't it?
It would be hilarious.
By the way, Crowder last year for the Bucks, he averaged 6.2 points per game, along with 3.2 rebounds. And for those who are wondering, from the 3-point range, he shot almost 35%.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Don't forget, watch the show. Use the hashtag SB Live. Follow us on the X platform at 973 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. We are just getting started, and we got a busy show today. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Alex Falst is going to call the game this weekend Apple TV Plus, Phillies and Braves Friday night. He'll preview that series and why it's such a big one so early in the season. Jeff Mosher, Football at 4, and our buddy Michael Kasky-Blomain from 97.3 ESPN.com. That's all today on the Sports Bash, live on 97.3 ESPN.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
With Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
2:31 on a Wednesday. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Mike Gill with you. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. A lot happening. You got the Phillies, no lineup, no problem last night. I say no lineup. A depleted lineup is what I should say. But Trey Turner, the $300 million man, coming up $300 million worth. A couple bombs last night, including one on Waveland Avenue out there. You don't see that all that much. Good to see Trey Turner. But what about the game from Michael Mercado? Phillies pitching continuing to carry them. We got that, plus Sixers free agency continues. All that now with Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Michael, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Mike, how are you today?
All is good. It's funny. The Phillies first place and, 9 games up. All the injuries and everybody kind of hitting the panic button. The Braves got to 7, and the next thing you know, you look back up, it's up to 9. But they got to finish this series out with the Cubbies. But, man, this little series leading in with the Braves and the Dodgers into the All-Star break, this is going to be a pretty big time of the year to see what this Phillies team, I really think this could set the tone for what the second half of the year will look like.
Yeah, Mike, I thought last night's win was an actual big one when you talk about the course of a 162-game season. To go out there and get the first game on this road trip kind of eases the pressure on the rest of the road trip, right? And you bring up a great point about Trey Turner. Look at his numbers and say to yourself, if he didn't miss 6 to 7 weeks of the season, I know Bryce Harper is in the candidate, the talk for an MVP, but with Trey Turner also being the talk for an MVP, if he didn't miss 6, 7 weeks of the season with the way he's played so far this season, and I'll come back to the Michael Mercado performance last night. That's when you know your baseball team is having one of those years. It's when a guy comes up like Michael Mercado on the road in Wrigley Field, gives you 5 good innings to start a road trip, and you get a big win. Nobody expected that. When you get contributions from the Michael Mercados of the world, the Cody Clemens of the world, the David Dahls of the world, the Spencer Turnbulls of the world, that's when those unknown guys come through for you. That's how you know you're in the midst of a special regular season.
Yeah, and look, this is the third guy from the Rays organization they went and got. Mercado. Now, we don't know what he's going to be, but there was a lot of people who liked Mercado even entering the season here. But people forget, they got Christopher Sanchez from the Rays. And I want to ask you about Christopher Sanchez because he just got picked as National League Pitcher of the Month, okay? At what point do you, in your mind, if you're the organization, say this guy has outperformed someone who has a better resume than him?
Well, I think he's established himself as a mainstay in the starting rotation. I think you look at this as no fluke. Obviously his last 2 starts have been magnificent. Complete game shutout, and he threw 7 shutout innings the one before that. So as we've seen with Ranger Suarez, is he going to go out there and put zeros on the scoreboard every outing? No. But has he established himself as a mainstay pitcher? Can you say that this is no fluke? Absolutely. Remember, this dates back to August of last year where he really started to develop that changeup and really turn the corner. So to me, and they've got him locked up through 2030 right now, he's part of this organization and a big part of it and their plans going forward for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
All right. Well, the question I guess that I would further that is, this isn't to suggest that Nola's having a bad year. He's not. but it's clear Sanchez is having a better year, is he not? So does that even cross your mind in those, when you get to a playoff? Do you say, you know what? I know who Nola is. He's been really good. But Christopher, because I asked this because the fourth guy only really gets to pitch maybe once or twice in the playoff.
Yeah.
Does it, if Sanchez stays on this pace the rest of the year and Nola pitches as well as he has, does that even cross your mind? I guess we're taking into account that Suarez is already in and Wheeler's already in.
Right. Yeah, obviously it would cross your mind, basically, and would be cause for discussion. I think the answer to that discussion would be you would start Nola and maybe, use Sanchez as a fourth starter and then, kind of spot him in when you didn't need a fourth starter, much the way the Phillies spotted Ranger Suarez in 2022, where he started a game, he came out of the bullpen, he closed Game 5 of the National League Championship Series. I think Sanchez is much more adept at that role than Aaron Nola would be. So to get the best of both players and maximize both their abilities, I would make Sanchez that fourth starter, start Nola in the playoffs, and then try to use Sanchez. If you didn't need a fourth starter for a period, try to use him the way they used Ranger Suarez back in 2022. I think he's more than capable of that.
Good problem to have. The Phillies last night, my buddy, it's funny, lives out on the West Coast, and he's a Cubs fan, and he texted me. He said, "Who is Jeff Hoffman?" And I said, "It's the Phillies closer." He said, "I never heard of him." I said, "You will in a minute." But Jeff Hoffman pitched a scoreless ninth, 7 save. I don't know that he is their closer, but right now for you, is that the spot they need to target, or is it still that offense? Because now you're watching a team without Schwarber, without Harper, without Real Muto, and they're kind of figuring their way through. So do you look and say they still need that bat, or would you target that back end of the bullpen? I know Tanner Scott's name has been mentioned, some other bullpen arms. What's more important right now?
Well, you can never have too many bullpen arms, but I'm going with the right-handed hitter off the bench, outfielder guy who can maybe play that corner outfield position. I still don't want to end the season the way the Phillies ended it last year with Jake Cave at the plate, right? I really don't feel comfortable, if the Phillies are going to end their season down a run in Game 7 and they've got to send Whit Merrifield up there, right? Or Kristen Pache, So give me somebody that the Phillies can send up to the plate and, basically with some confidence, basically. So I think that would be the number one option. And obviously you can always use bullpen help. But Mike, I like this bullpen. I mean, you saw Hoffman last night. The last couple of outings were a little shaky. I think what you're seeing a little bit right now is pitchers going through a little bit of a dead arm period. Hoffman appeared to recover from that last night. His stuff looked absolutely electric. Soto pitched a scoreless inning last night. He's been fantastic his last couple of outings out. Kirkland threw a scoreless inning last night. Alvarado is back there. Strahm, I think a little bit of a dead arm period, but he'll bounce out of that. So, they've got 4 or 5 guys back there in that bullpen. So give me the right-handed hitter, 1, and the bullpen guy 2.
Yeah, you make a good point, and it's just, I guess we have that mindset, Mike, where there's that guy at the end, and that's where I wonder if, adding another, like a Tanner Scott, who's a left-handed closer, him and Hoffman, so that they can kind of deploy Alvarado the way that they used to. Instead of using Alvarado in that closing role, he came in the 6th inning when there was 2 lefties, or he came in you find the biggest spot of the game before the 9th and use him, and then you have the fallback guy. You wonder if that's what they're still trying to figure out, how to kind of, because Soto's been pitching really well. Are they starting to trust him a little more? There's so many interesting things going on, but you just mentioned a lot of guys in that bullpen that you really like. Strahm kind of hit that wall a little bit. Does he bounce back? Is the pixie dust off of him? So there's a lot of things they're trying to figure out, I feel like, in the back end of that bullpen.
Yeah, it's all going to work itself out over the next month. I guess we have a month to go, just about until the trade deadline. Yeah, I like what you said there. If you can get another guy in the back end, you can move Alvarado up to the 7th inning and even shorten the game even more. What they can do, it'll be interesting to see how they look at it. Do they look at a guy like Soto that they can put in there in the 5th, 6th, or 7th inning and keep Alvarado on the back end if they don't get a bullpen guy? Like I said, to me, that bullpen is very, very good. If they get another guy, great, because you can never have too much pitching. But, again, don't end the season with Jake Cave or Whit Merrifield or Kristen Pache at the plate. Get me a right-handed bat that can, put some fear in the heart of the opponents.
All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. Let's go over to the Sixers and what they've done so far. We talked a little bit about it Monday. They haven't done anything since Monday. Paul George still at the top. Andre Drummond as the backup. Eric Gordon in the mix. They brought back Kelly Oubre. Do you think that Daryl Morey is kind of done? He waits to the season, or is there one more trick up Morey's sleeve?
No, I think he's got some more work to do. I'd like to see maybe a power forward, a stretch four type of guy, added to the roster. And again, we talked about the other day, I'd like to see a veteran point guard basically added to the roster also. To run that second unit and maybe to play with Maxey sometimes and take pressure off Maxey. So I think those are two priorities for the Sixers right now. Get me a stretch four, a power forward, and get me a veteran point guard to run that second unit and take some pressure off Maxey. I think, you add those two pieces and you improve this team even more.
We'll take a look at the free agency here. By the way, everything is kind of, quieted down a little bit here. I like to see what you think your Knicks need to do still, as they made the big splash early. Anunoby made the trade, lose Hartenstein. Now, where are they kind of sitting out here? Yesterday, that was a big discussion on kind of who's closed the gap the most on Boston. There's what Philly needs to kind of still do. What do you want to see the Knicks still do?
I like the Knicks roster. I think what they need to do is basically, solidify the center position. They have Mitchell Robinson there, but it would be nice to get another backup center to sort of fill that Hartenstein role. So I think that's their weakness. And when I come back to the Knicks, I honestly think, Mike, that people are kind of overlooking. And I know this guy, is very frustrating to watch. Defensively, he could be a nightmare at a time. But Julius Randle is an all-NBA type player.
Why do people not? Why, like, I have one of my interns here. He's a Knicks fan. I can't stand. I don't like Randle. Why do some of the people not like Randle?
Well, defensively, he's very hard to watch. I mean, he's very, very hard to watch defensively. And his offensive game is not the prettiest of games. There's a lot of isolation, one-on-one, ball stopping when he gets it. He's not a tremendous passer, but he's a guy that can go get you 20 to 25 points a game. And you look back at what the Knicks record was in January when they got Anunoby and they had Randle healthy and Brunson healthy. They went something like 23-3 over that period. So I think people are kind of not selling Randle coming back healthy enough for the Knicks. I mean, you're talking about adding a guy who didn't play in the playoffs at all, missed the last 2 months of the regular season. He's an all-NBA player who averages 20 to 25 points a game. So I think that's a big boost for the Knicks, as frustrating as he is to watch at times.
By the way, Mike McGarry, pressofac.com, the Mets, 18-8. Best record in baseball since June 1.
Yeah, they've turned it around. Whether it's Grimace since he threw out that first pitch, whether it's the guy's song, OMG, I mean, a bunch of things going on. Basically, what they're doing is just hitting the ball. Ever since they put Lindor to the top of the lineup, their lineup has, been much better than it was before. J.D. Martinez, who was one of those guys who signed back in April, maybe it took him a while to hit his stride. He's had a couple of big home runs, including one against the Nationals on Monday night. You still have Pete Alonso at first base. Brandon Nimmo has 52 RBIs. He's had a great month. And the pitching, which is familiar names, right? Names we've heard over the years, names that aren't going to excite us. Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, guys like that are coming through and delivering solid performances. Their bullpen is still an absolute hot mess. Diaz is, ridiculous. He has not pitched well. Every time that bullpen door opens, it's like spinning the bullpen wheel of death. You don't know what you're going to get. They almost blew a 6-run lead to the Nationals on Monday night. They barely got out of there, won the game 10-8 or something like that. But they are playing better. And in today's baseball world, I guess they're a game or a game and a half out of that final wild card spot. So if you're a Mets fan, you got a little summer to look forward to.
Yeah, it's nice to, hey, listen, Mike, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. The triangle of Philly, New York, Boston in the NBA, that's now something to have those three teams at the top. You got a little Philly and the Mets now. I mean, yes, they're a wide gap in the East, but if the Mets somehow made a wild card and they got stuck playing together, that would be fun. I don't think the Giants are quite there, although did you watch the Hard Knocks last night?
I did not. I'm going to sit down and watch that tonight. I did not catch that episode last night.
Well,
so.
That looks like it's a. I did not see it. I've seen a lot of clips, but I want to dive into that. I think there's a lot of unbelievable access that they're giving us there. But hey, it could be the summer of the Philly-New York rivalry regained in baseball and in basketball. We had it in this year of basketball, and I'm looking forward to that, buddy.
Yeah, and if you look back to the National League, including your Philadelphia Phillies in 2022, go check the records of the teams that made the World Series the last couple of years from the National League. Go see what their records were at the end of June, and you'll find out they're a lot more like the New York Mets record than they are like the Philadelphia Phillies record right now.
All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. Happy 4th, Michael. We are off on Friday. We will talk to you on Monday.
All right. See you guys down the road. Happy 4th of July out there to everybody. Thanks a lot.
All right. Make sure you read Mike over at the Press of Atlantic City and pressofac.com and listen to him here Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on the Sports Bash. Always love having Mike on. Great conversation. Get you that little synergy between the two rivals in a lot of fun way. He covers all the Philly teams. We get insight on it all here with Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Thanks to him. Coming up at 3:30 today, Alex Foss is calling the game for Apple Plus on Friday night. So I want to get from him as he's preparing for Phillies and Braves. I know the Phillies still play the Cubs here, but Phillies-Braves, that is this weekend. Is this kind of like a knockout blow type of series? Is this one of those knockout blow type of series early in the season? Don't forget, Thursday, July 4th, Phillies and the Cubs. Coverage begins at 1:30 on 97.3 ESPN. And on Saturday, Phillies and Braves. The coverage begins at 6:30 on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 97.3 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
All right, Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget Phillies baseball tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 1:30. Phillies and Cubs. Phillies and Braves Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. You can listen to both games here. 4th of July tomorrow. Could use some happy hour Friday 4th of July advice. What are we getting on the 4th of July? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. What are we getting on the 4th of July? Give me a couple of good picks for the weekend. Give me a couple of good suggestions, if you will. A lot in the mix here today. We've been talking a little bit about the Phils, a little bit about the Sixers. Also, coming up at 4 o'clock today, Jeff Mosher has football at 4. It's funny because I was on Birds 365 this morning, and one of the conversations we got in was, we talked about a surprise Nolan Smith, and Johnny Mack was telling me he doesn't see Nolan Smith getting the playing time to become a surprise. Why? Because he thinks Bryce Huff is going to have like a 15-sack season, and that he's going to be such a important player that he won't be leaving the field all that much, and doesn't know how Nolan Smith's going to get on the field. So we can get into that as well with Jeff Mosher tonight during football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform at 97.3 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Coming up next hour, we'll do some Phils as they get ready for the Cubs. Plus Alex Faust from...
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
3 o'clock, Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive. Phillies and Cubs last night. Let's dive into the game last night and Michael Mercado. First start for the Phils, and right off the bat, I mean, the kid is never looked like the moment was too big for him. Like we talked about this yesterday, you're making your major league debut at Wrigley Field. There's few places in baseball that still have that feel to it, right? And Wrigley Field is one of them. Where Wrigley Field, you can kind of get caught up in like, my gosh, what did anybody see after the game last night? I think it was Ruben Amaro Jr. said, like, the first time I stepped on a baseball field, like, I couldn't feel my feet. Like, it just felt like you're playing Major League Baseball. Well, you're playing Major League Baseball in one of the meccas of baseball at Wrigley Field here. He goes out there. He gives up 2 hits, 1 run, 5 innings. He makes his first career start. He's 25 years old, and he absolutely looked so poised last night. He looked like, hey, man, this is my 150th career start. And that's what the Phillies kind of needed last night. Just a little pick-me-up from the pitching rotation at a time where the team has just been kind of getting dealt some bad news after bad news. Hey, Spencer Turnbull, who had been a great story, we can't turn to him. Walker is not available. We'll go to this kid, Michael Mercado, and he comes in. Now, look, is Michael Mercado going to make us have another discussion down the road about whether or not you have to stick with him? How great would that be if, hey, Michael Mercado emerges from this as another guy this was a guy at one point that was a pretty well-thought-of pitcher. They got him from Tampa Bay, and he's a guy that the Phillies really liked. And, we talked about this when he got called up. There was an article written back in February about players that could be the surprise of each team's spring training. And the Phillies guy was Michael Mercado. And you're thinking to yourself, who the hell is Michael Mercado? No one even knew this guy was on the team. And now, not only is he on the team, he gets called up and he shows poise in his first start at Wrigley Field. And now the Phillies can breathe a little easier now and say, all right, we have a little depth here. This kid obviously showed he belonged. Does that mean he's going to be great? Does that mean he's going to be an all-star? Does that mean that you want to start, thinking about, making some crazy decision because you have Michael Mercado? No. But I think it definitely shows you have another young pitcher that you think, hey, we got something here. We definitely have some depth in our starting rotation, because I think that's one thing was, look, Wheeler, Nola, you had those 2 guys. And then you got Suarez, and now Sanchez. You got those 4 guys. And then after that, you were worried, what happens if somebody else gets hurt? Well, Spencer Turnbull stepped in, and now he's hurt. Well, you have Taijuan Walker. You know what he is, but now he's hurt. And then after that, you were kind of like, I don't know where they go, the Jeff Nelsons of the world. Well, obviously, the Phillies have now already passed over Jeff Nelson of the world, and it's the Michael Mercado. I guess because you have to think about this, Mick Abel has been such a disappointment for this team. Mick Abel and Andrew Painter, who, by the way, Andrew Painter did throw like a 25-pitch session. He's starting to throw to like some live hitters. He's not going to pitch in any games this year, Andrew Painter, but he is the team's top pitching prospect. And if you look at the Phillies, by the way, speaking of top prospects, Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford both just got announced to the Futures game. And those 2 guys are 20 years old. They're both at Jersey Shore High A baseball. Those guys are far away off from going. When you're at Jersey Shore, you still are, I would say Aiden Miller is ETA 2027, and Justin Crawford is possibly 2026. So you're still talking about 2 to 3 seasons off for those 2. So the Phillies really need to find some young guys somewhere to kind of fill the gap between what they have now and some of these guys starting to get older, right? You got Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, JT Realmuto. That group of guys, they're all the older guys that at some point you got to start to find the next group. Well, you got Bryson Stott, you got Brandon Marsh, you got Alec Bohm as position players. They are the ones that are kind of the ones that are here. there's a gap between them and the other group. So it's going to be interesting to see in 2 years from now if Aiden Miller, Justin Crawford, if those guys are kind of ready to kind of enter the fray and keep this window open for the Phillies, because it looks like they can connect the pitching. You're hoping anyway, with Suarez and Sanchez and then Painter, and if they can get McAble right. And let's say this Michael Mercado ends up being a fourth or fifth type of starter. It's a really interesting, big picture look last night. Mercado pitching well. He showed a lot of poise. And you wonder what he brings to this team big picture-wise in looking around in terms of trade possibilities, opening the door for, hey, did somebody watch that start and say, hey, Phillies, are you using that guy, Michael Mercado? Or can we make a call there? So I thought last night the Phillies overall, we'll take a look at what their offense did in just a second, but pitching-wise, I thought Mercado, and then the fact that they turned it over to the bullpen last night, and the first guy they turned it to, I do have to get into Soto, because Soto, how many straight games is he going on now where he hasn't given up a run? Soto was starting to kind of lock into something. Threw an inning last night, 2 strikeouts. Kerkering, he came in. He was his dominant self last night. Now, Ruiz, he had a tricky, I guess he came in the 9th with like a 6-1 lead, and he gave up that 3-run home run. Then Hoffman came in, though. Man, Hoffman, as McGarry talked about in the first hour, maybe he hit that kind of dead arm period a little bit right there, but then last night maybe he kind of got past it, and I thought he looked great last night. So Soto, Kerkering, even Marte pitched pretty well for the inning that he came in, and then Hoffman. But I thought Soto is starting to kind of emerge as an interesting story here as well.
Soto has 9 straight games where he has not allowed an earned run. And if you actually go back further than the last 9 games, he has allowed no more than 1 earned run overall, Mike, in the last 18 games. So he's allowing either 1 run or less in the last 18 straight appearances.
Yeah, he's pitched really well recently, man. Soto was the guy when Mercado left the game last night. What was that, the 5th inning, I guess?
He went through 5 innings.
Yeah, he went through 5th. So Phillies are up 5-1 in the 5th. So you have a 4-run lead. You turn things over to Soto, and the bullpen just dominates until that last inning with Ruiz. But, that's another night where Stott, 2 hits at the top of the lineup in the leadoff spot. He's been doing, Turner, 3 for 5, the 2 home runs, the 4 RBI. Turner's just been, carrying this team with everybody out. Bohm's struggling a little bit. He's back under 300. Marsh in the cleanup spot. He struggled last night. I saw, he struck out twice.
I will say, how much is the Bohm struggle, Mike, because there's no Harper and Schwarber in the lineup? That he's maybe missing that protection.
There's no doubt about it.
Other teams are adjusting, and they're saying, we got to stop Bohm more so than anybody else.
No doubt about it. But for whatever reason it doesn't negate the fact that, he's the guy now. And, I think one of the things with Bohm, I like Bohm, and I understand Bohm is what he is. He's not the guy he's not an MVP. He's not a league MVP. He's a very good hitter.
Right.
He is, I don't want to say a complimentary piece. He's not Harper. He's not that level of guy. But when he's not the main guy, he's very good. Right. But as the main guy, he's not the main guy. I mean, if Alec Bohm's the best hitter on your lineup, you're probably not a very good team.
Well, you made the comparison before, Mike, about how, back in 2009, Raul Ibanez had that great year. But part of it why he had a great year was because they had Howard and Utley and Rollins. He was the 4th guy basically in that lineup. Bohm is kind of similar. Like, Bohm can be a great player when he's not the number 1 or number 2 guy, because if he's the 3 or 4, he can excel because he has a little less pressure on him.
Yeah, and look, their lineup right now, for them to score 6 runs last night, I think that's is a huge accomplishment for them, with Marsh hitting 4, Castellanos, who struggled all year, hitting 5, Clemens, one thing with Clemens, you overexpose Clemens, you start to see the trickle down. Dahl, he struck out all 4 times last night. You start to expose Dahl too much, and that's what ends up happening. Yes, Stubbs had a double, I think he hit, knocked in a couple of runs last night. The catching spot, since Real Muto's gone out, really hasn't hurt them all that much. I mean, honestly, it really hasn't. I mean, between Stubbs and Marchand. Now, I don't know if the lineup is out yet for tonight. I haven't seen. Let me see real quick if the Phillies lineup is out tonight, and it is not yet. But, Marchand and Stubbs, the two of them have done a pretty solid job in Real Muto's absence. Like, you haven't had a crater at the catcher position.
Stubbs has a 6-game hitting streak in games that he has started. And, Mike, he has a hit in, 15 of the last 17 games he has started. So Stubbs is actually giving you a little something at the plate.
Yeah, and Marchand has, I can recall at least 2 home runs that he has hit, and they've been big home runs for the team.
And also, you got to give Marchand and Stubbs credit the way they've handled the pitching staff. The pitching staff hasn't, gone completely off the cliff. Like, these guys are doing
If anything, the pitching staff is... Look, we were concerned with where the injuries occurred. At that time, the Braves were only 7 games back, and you were wondering if they were kind of creeping back. Well, the injuries have occurred. The lineup is what it is, and you're 9 games up now. You've actually reopened the gap from 7 to 9. The Phillies are 9 games up on the Braves, and that's why, we talked to Alex coming up at the bottom of the hour. He's going to call the Phillies and Braves for Apple TV Plus Friday, Saturday, Sunday is that Phillies-Braves series. You wonder if this could really be kind of a knockout blow for the division. Like, if the Phillies win 2 out of 3 here, you're going to knock the Braves to double-digit games back. Now, you do play the Dodgers coming up right after that, and who knows what happened. But, if you're the Braves, you got to be looking at this series as saying, if we can sweep this series against a depleted Phillies team, now it depends on what happens today and tomorrow between the two teams, but you're 9 back. Let's say the Phillies lose tonight and tomorrow, and the Braves win tonight and tomorrow. You're 7 back. If the Braves can sweep that series, you're now only 4 games back with the Dodgers on there. This is where the Braves can really chop away and cut back into this to make the second half a race. If the Phillies win the series, you're in a situation where the Braves could almost be double-digit games back at the All-Star break. That's almost insurmountable with the Phillies pitching staff.
Yeah, and the Braves, they're going at it with arguably their 2 best pitchers this weekend because they got Fried on Friday and Lopez on Sunday. So if you're Atlanta, you're banking on the idea of get the Phillies to Atlanta. Let's take a couple games off of this lead. But if you're Philadelphia and you can find a way to get 2 out of 3 instead of the Braves getting 2 out of 3, it changes everything. And I know it's not easy to go against Fried and Lopez, but as you saw last night, Lopez pitched last night, Mike, and basically he got outlasted. He pitched 4 good innings. By the time they got to the 5th, he fell apart. So if you're Philadelphia, you're always trying to, if you don't want to look ahead necessarily, but we're looking ahead. You look ahead to Lopez and Fried. If you're Philadelphia, you got to be like, how can we outlast these pitchers?
Yeah, one thing, too, with the Phillies, that's what's going to keep them hanging around this race. They're going to have to find ways to score some runs, but they're pitching. You have to hope, if you're the Philadelphia Phillies, you have to hope that your pitching keeps you competitive and you win those 1-run games, those 3-2 games, those 4-3 games, and that will only make the team better.
Yeah.
That only makes your team better when you have to kind of push through and find ways to win, because teams that can find different ways to win, and this is the time of the year where they might say, hey, we found a way to win this game and we did something a little different because we couldn't rely on the home run. It is a way to kind of make your team a little bit stronger. And right now, think about this, everybody. The Phillies are almost 30 games over 500. Think about that. They're almost 30 games over 500. We're not at the All-Star break. They're 27 games over 500. It's unbelievable with some of the things that they've dealt with. Keep this into consideration. We asked the question, how good is this Phillies team? Trey Turner missed 6 weeks, right? What do you mean, 6 weeks? Trey
6
Turner,
weeks.
something like that? And Trey Turner this year, all right, Trey Turner last year was not good for the first, up until August.
Last year, yeah.
Yeah.
Trey
Turner right now is hitting .338 with a .386 on-base percentage. He's got 5 home runs and 18 RBI. and 10 stolen bases in 46 games. So he missed 6 weeks. You're talking about a guy who, if you double those numbers, I mean, how many games did the Phillies play? About 80? Something like that? Were they 50? 56 and 29.
56 and 29, correct.
So they've played about 80 games right now. If you double his numbers, you got a guy hitting,
First was hitting 300, which
with
is
338.
Yeah.
But if you double, I mean, he would have, he'd be in the MVP conversation. I mean, he'd have over 60 RBI. I mean, he'd have about 80 RBI. If you double 38, you'd have almost 80 RBI.
Right.
My bad. I'm sorry. That's runs scored, not RBI. But if you double his RBI, he'd be at about 40-some RBI in that 2-hole there. You would have a guy who would be maybe not in the MVP like top of it, but like somewhere like in the top 7. He missed 6 weeks of the season. Now you've played without Harper, no Schwarber. You've had no Real Muto now for going on to what, your 3rd week?
Yep. Those
guys are pretty big pieces, and you're almost 30 games over 500. So he asked the question, how good is this team? They're good enough that they're able to have a 9-game lead without Trey Turner for 6 weeks, JT Realmuto for multiple weeks, now going on to a week without Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber. I mean, that's pretty darn impressive.
It's very impressive, and you got to give this team credit for not just shrugging their shoulders and saying, we're without our guys. Oh, well. Like, they didn't do that at all, Mike. And Turner's earning his paycheck and more right now. You got to give the pitching staff credit for not blinking an eye. I mean, Christopher Sanchez, the games that he has had in recent weeks have been the guy gets a contract extension, gets better. I mean, how many times can you say that? A guy gets a contract extension.
You're hoping if I give you the money that you get better, not regress.
Well, I mean, it doesn't happen, though. There are many times that guys get the money and they're like, thanks for the money.
Well, and I asked the question to McGarry, at what point, Christopher Sanchez, let's be honest, he's been better than Nola. Now, I don't know that means he would get the call over Nola in a playoff series. But at what point, if you're the Phillies, do you have to evaluate that and say, look, Christopher Sanchez has just been flat out better than Aaron Nola. Look, Christopher Sanchez has a 2.41 ERA and a 1.19 whip. Nola's ERA is 3.43. I mean, it's a run better, and the whips are comparable. Nola's whip is better, 104 to 119. But Christopher Sanchez overall has been almost the better pitcher across the board. At what point do you say this guy has outperformed Aaron Nola? I think that's going to be – I don't think it would happen. I don't think the Phillies would make that decision.
I don't think it would happen, but I definitely think if you're the Phillies, you might go into a playoff series against certain teams and say, hey, look, a team like – just use the example, the Dodgers, they have a good amount of lefties, big-time lefties in their lineup. Do we put Sanchez in a specific matchup against that team and maybe make Aaron Nola lower down the pitching rotation for that series, for example?
Yeah, I like, the way McGarry said it was like, hey, maybe Nola starts the game and Sanchez piggybacks him, in those early rounds. Because the way it works out, for those of you, who are trying to remember and recall, the first series is a 5-game series, so your first pitcher would be, say Wheeler, then your second pitcher would probably be Nola, then your third pitcher would be Sanchez Suarez. So then so what's been happening the last couple of years is the Phillies in the wild card round, which theoretically they wouldn't play this year.
Right, they would be out of it. They would be advanced already.
Right, they wouldn't have to play that wild card round. But what has happened to the Phillies is they swept those wild card rounds. So they only played 2 games.
Right.
And then they went to the series against the Braves, and they generally start with Suarez as the third guy. Now you would be into the division round right off the bat.
Correct.
So in game 1, you would pitch Wheeler. Game 2, you would probably pitch Nola. Game 3 would be,
or
although
Suarez,
you could pitch Suarez game 2 and Nola game 3. Then you need a fourth starter one time.
Right.
And then you don't use the fifth starter, you go back to number one because of the travel days and all that stuff. So the fourth starter generally only gets used one time in each series.
Right.
In the World Series, it would be the same thing. So Christopher Sanchez essentially would be the guy who only gets 2 starts in the playoffs.
Is he worth getting those starts or more? Like what is the barometer? Like are you going off of just hey, Nola's been here numerous times, so we're gonna give
Well,
him...
that's what I'm asking. At what point? Because Sanchez, it's his season right now.
It's really good. It's arguably better than Nola.
That's what I'm saying. Is he has been essentially better than Nola?
But what's more valuable? Is it the postseason experience or is it the hot hand?
Well, I don't want to say it's a hot hand. He's had a better year. That's not a hot hand. He's been more consistent this year. His ERA is a run better than Nola's.
Right.
So he's been the better guy, big picture. Now, Nola's better whip. I mean, they're comparable. Like, you look at it, Nola's had 17 starts. Sanchez has had 16. Mm-hmm. Nola has 12 quality starts. Sanchez only has 9.
Right.
Now, some of that is because Sanchez pitch counts get high and he comes out of the games a little earlier, so you might take that into consideration. Nola has 9 wins. Sanchez has 6. Not that the wins-loss thing matters all that much. A lot of that's because Sanchez doesn't get through the 5th inning a lot of times because of the high pitch counts. Now, you would say, well, there's your answer. The high pitch counts, you can't count on Sanchez, and that might be fair. So I don't think the Phillies are legitimately thinking about it, but I would say in 107 innings this year, Sanchez Nola has 25 walks. In 93 innings, Sanchez has 24 walks. So Nola's been better there, but here's the big number. Nola's given up 14 home runs this year. Sanchez has given up 1.
Huge.
That is a big, big difference maker right there. Is Sanchez keeps the ball in the park, Nola gives up the long ball. So I think the Phillies would not make that knee-jerk reaction move and make Nola the 4th starter. But I think they would have to, if you just took the names off the back of the jersey, you would almost have to consider it.
And that's why I say maybe it comes down to matchups too, Mike. Maybe in certain teams, certain situations, you're like, look, I really like Sanchez or Nola versus this specific team, and that's why I'm putting them here in the rotation.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Hey, I'm Mike Gill. Fed up with noisy neighbors, endless maintenance, Progressive Fence and Rail has robust fences and low-maintenance railings for privacy and ease. Their stylish decks, gazebos, sleek sheds will perform your backyard into the perfect outdoor gathering spot. Right now, get 20% off all materials and an extended 4-year warranty plus flexible finance options. Get your free estimate today at ProgressiveFenceandRail.com. Coming up here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Holy mackerel. We just got a lot into the Phillies' big picture, but this weekend, they got the Braves coming into town. Braves are in town this weekend. Actually, the Phillies and Braves is Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Is it in Atlanta?
In Atlanta.
It's in Atlanta. That's what I thought. I was going to say, actually, it's in Atlanta, but it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Because today's Wednesday, it's got me thrown off a little bit. But we're going to look at that Braves series a little bit. Are they the two teams that will meet again in October? What makes the Phillies better this season over the last 2 years? And what surprises Alex Faust about this Phillies team? He's going to call the game Friday night for Apple TV Plus. Braves and Phillies. It's the big matchup Friday night. We're going to look at that next on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive.
You're listening with Mike Gill.
Never thought this radio stunt would catch on so big.
On 97.3 ESPN.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Big series this weekend. Phillies and the Braves. You can see it on Apple TV Plus Friday night. Alex Faust will join us. He's doing the play-by-play with Ryan Spielborgs as the Friday night Apple TV Plus Phillies-Braves. They got a good one, and it's probably kind of a defining series in the National League East. We're going to talk a little bit about that right now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Alex, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Should be a fun one this weekend, Mike.
Yeah, I know 9 games separate the two teams, and you take a look at that division. It's been the reverse the last couple of years. The Braves have kind of owned it. They won by 14 games last year. They won by 14 games the year before. But as these two teams meet this weekend before the All-Star break, are these the two teams that you expect will be there in October again, meeting for a third time?
I mean, there's no real convincing case why not. I will say this. I mean, I think the Braves are trying to search for something here right now. Obviously losing Acuna to injury and losing their ace and Spencer Strider. So if I were to kind of map out this weekend, I think this series means a lot more for the Braves than it does for the Phillies at this stage of the season. You mentioned the way the division's gone, and we've seen it, in previous years where the Phillies got off to a slow start, have rallied back. The Braves have gotten out to large deficits and have rallied back. So the division is far from over, regardless of what happens this weekend. But I think you're right in that it could be a defining series for Atlanta, and whether they're competing for the division or whether they're thinking about just the wild card.
Yeah, it's been the reverse there. So what I want to get your thoughts on, Alex, is when you look at this Phillies team, they didn't do a lot of change. They kept it. They ran it back. What makes them better this season over the team the last 2 years that finished 14 games out of first place?
Well, there's something to be said for the fact that you do have the same core group coming back. Let's also, not make a mistake here in overlooking how good the pitching has been. There was between, the kind of under the radar deals, signing Spencer Turnbull, kind of bolstering the rotation. Taijuan Walker, after being shut down at the end of spring's been good, but top of your rotation guys, Zach Wheeler, the reigning National League pitcher of the month, Aaron Nola has been just at the top of the rotation for Philly for so long. You know what you expect with these guys. And the bullpen's been good as well. Yes, the offense has been great, and they've, especially recently with Harper and Schwarber out, they've gotten contributions from different guys. Trey Turner's really stepped up over the last week. But there is something to be said for when you have a team that has proven, especially in October, that it can win, the confidence to run it back, come into spring training, know who you are as a ball club, have an identity that's already set. There's something to be said for having an easy on-ramp to a season that allows you to get off to a good start. Now, yeah, the Phillies are the best team in baseball, not only because they've pitched well, they've gotten timely hitting, but they've figured out how to play as a team, and it goes a long way, the leadership in this group, to walk into a season and know who you are as a team.
Alex Faust, Apple TV Plus, Friday night, Phillies and the Braves. And, there's so many storylines in this one. We can talk so much about it. But you look at the Phillies. Let's look at the Braves real fast. Why have the Braves fallen so far behind? I mean, we know they have a couple of injuries here. The Phillies have dealt with injuries too. But when you look at the preparation for this game and say, man, 9 games separating these two teams, what has happened to the Braves so far?
Well, there's no doubt that the injury to Spencer Strider, he's out for the season, and the injury to Michael Harris lately, but Ronald Acuna before that, have really hampered the Braves' offense. It changes the dynamic. You have a knock-on effect, especially with Acuna at the top of the lineup, a guy who so reliably gets on base. Well, he is not there now, not getting on base. He's not stealing bases, so you're going station to station more. You're not putting yourself in a position to drive in runs as much. You're not putting as much pressure on the opposing pitching staff to induce certain things, whether going for strikeouts or trying to induce ground balls. It just changes the approach entirely. And especially lately with the injury to Harris, you have a second base stealer. Atlanta has the second fewest stolen bases in the National League, only to San Francisco, and they lost to the Giants last night since the injury to Acuna. Beyond that, the offense has suffered, especially the bottom portion of their order. Last year, 6 through 9. Remember how good that Braves team was, 1 through 9? Well, 6 through 9 this year. They're hitting 218 at last check. Last year, that was at 256. It's just a huge difference when you're talking about lack of pressure at the leadoff spot and then lack of production in the bottom half of the order. I don't think the pitching has been as much of a concern, even though they are missing Spencer Strider, obviously. But the offense has been a major story for the Braves. Already, they have more games this season where they have where they have scored 2 runs or less this year. Already more games like that than all of last year combined. So there is a serious offensive rut that this team is in.
Well, you're going to get a good one, Nola and Max Fried. I mean, when you look at the pitching matchup there, the Phillies have Nola, Suarez, Michael Mercado, who we saw against the Cubs make his debut the other night. But the Phillies, their pitching just keeps coming at you with the top 4 guys, Nola, Suarez, Wheeler, and now Sanchez. We were discussing, Alex, before you came on, at what point does Sanchez can't do anymore to show that, hey, I belong in that conversation for a playoff start too? We know the 4th guy generally only gets 1 start, but, I mean, they have 4 guys who all deserve playoff starts, and now Mercado's pitched well, Spencer Turnbull is pitching well. But I would imagine if you take a look at what surprised the most about the Phillies, the depth of the pitching has got to be up there.
Yes. That was a big question, no doubt, coming into the year, was not the top end, but the depth side of the equation. And that's what you want going into any postseason, right? The ability to change things up as needed. The way postseason pitching works anymore, especially with a short division series, right? You only need to put in Sharpie 3 starters. Well, then you have a couple of long guys in the pen in case of emergency or in case you just want to use your best guys. And then the back end of the bullpen has been solid, too. I know they haven't been able to use Hoffman and Alvarado much lately. I know Hoffman pitched last night. Alvarado hasn't seen a save situations since June 11th, which is kind of crazy to think about. So this Philadelphia pitching staff, the way things line up for them, I think it's a bigger story than even the top end of the offense. And as good as the offense has been, you need to have good pitching to win in the postseason. And they're certainly showing not only the top end, but also, as mentioned, their depth.
Alex, you mentioned the injuries and what it did to the Braves, not having Ronald Acuna and him having it at the top of the lineup. Are you surprised that the Phillies have persevered without Turner and then Real Muto, and now have kind of, they've expanded their lead in the division in the short time without Harper and Schwarber?
Well, I think they were fortunate in a way that the injuries all didn't happen at once. Turner went down, obviously, with the hamstring injury in May. Real Muto has been out for a while. And then only recently Schwarber and Harper have been out. So, yeah, maybe if the injuries were more severe to Harper and Schwarber, then we'd have an interesting conversation about, okay, how will they fare over the long haul? But the fact that Turner has bounced back and produced right away, I mean, he's having a great week. We had the tying and go-ahead runs that he produced on Sunday. Then he had the 2-homer game last night. I think they're a little bit fortunate in that all those injuries didn't happen at once. But let's also be clear, the way that this Phillies lineup was built is also a reflection on how deep they've become even offensively. And now if you can, throw in Alec Boehm, who's having a career season and certainly making a case for an all-star nod. They're asking Johan Rojas to do a little bit more. If you just get a few more contributions from the bottom end, I mean, let's also be clear. Like, there's nothing to complain about. You have the best run differential in baseball. They're producing a lot early in games. They have the most in the National League in terms of first-inning runs. This team finds ways, and there's a reason why they've become such a juggernaut this season.
Yeah, it's been a fun year so far, Alex Faust. Apple TV Plus is where you can watch the game on Friday night, and we're taking a look at that matchup between these two teams, and you take a look at all the different things that have happened so far and where we are when they get to this weekend series. Kind of an interesting one. Like, the Phillies win this series, you could go to the All-Star break, and the Phillies, could be double digits up. If the Braves can win this series, it should set up for an interesting second half. So, Alex, do we look at a second half where you think the Braves can catch the Phillies, or is a fait accompli that the Phillies finally are going to get this NL East?
I think it's too early to say that there's one outcome is in the cards or not. I would not pencil in that the Phillies, even with a sweep, I wouldn't pencil in that they are automatically winning the division. But put this way, you take a lot of pressure off yourselves in the second half, and it'll make it really interesting to see what Dave Dombrowski and the front office want to cook up in terms of any sort of moves at the deadline. I mean, this is a good team as is. How much tinkering do you want to do? As I said earlier, I think this series does mean a lot more to the Braves, who are trying to maybe send a message here against a Phillies team that, for the first time in a while, they're looking up at in a big way here. But also, can this Braves team change the way that they play a little bit? They've struggled with runners in scoring position. If they do get those opportunities over the weekend, can they find ways to drive in runs? Can they rely on the pitching staff that they have with Fried at the top here? Chris Sale obviously has put together a great year. I find this series interesting in a lot of ways, not only because of the division race, but also the message it could send. They're going to play 7 times in a 12-day span in August. That, to me, will determine the division. I think this weekend will be fascinating, and I want everybody to tune in, but I don't want to mischaracterize it as determining the division when we're just before the All-Star break.
Yeah, I know. When the Phillies and Braves get together, everybody's tuning in because Phillies love watching this matchup. The thing has turned into a great little series. The theater of the Braves being 14 games, the exact number 14, 2 years in a row. The Phillies kind of dominating those series, especially in Philadelphia. That has turned into a whole story as well. So this one should be fun. But, Alex, the National League has been kind of a mess with the Phillies, Braves, Dodgers. I guess you could throw the Brewers in there. Are those the 4, or is there somebody else you like?
If you're just doing a cursory glance at the standings, I think you'd have to say, especially with the way the Cubs were expected to be a lot better than they've been. And obviously, Philadelphia got the better of them last night. Cincinnati got off to a terrible start. The wild card picture, I think, is more the mess than anything else here. I think St. Louis has been, I don't want to say a pleasant surprise because they were expected to kind of be in the mix, but they're a stronger team than perhaps we had thought they would be. How about the Mets and their comeback? They were left for dead about a month ago, and their resurgence has been a lot of fun to watch, and they're right in the mix here. I think the big question for Atlanta is, if they don't win this series, do they sink to a place where they're fighting for their playoff lives? And if the Phillies, get, let's say, for instance, the Braves sweep the Phillies, is that a message sent with, a potential rematch for October here lining up and how that might transpire? I think that's where my head is at more than anything else. Realistically, the wild card picture, I don't see the Braves falling there, but man, if they don't get their offense in gear, they're not that far up on that cut line, all things considered. And that's why I do think for the Phillies, it's an opportunity to really put a scare into this Braves team that may change the way that they approach the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And try to stay afloat in a playoff race as opposed to thinking they're comfortable making it and have their sights set more on how they tinker for October.
Alex, obviously Phillies, Braves, Friday night, Apple TV Plus. You get those games on Fridays. You get a chance to see a lot of teams throughout. What's the best team you've seen this season?
I think it's the Phillies.
Yep.
I had them early in the year. I did a game for Fox Sports early in the season. It was the first matchup against the Braves. And just kind of, follow them from time to time. Like every time you look, they're doing something special. Now, I'd have to agree with some folks I've talked to around the game who feel there is no one standout team that is far and away the favorite. A lot of folks were pointing to the Yankees at the beginning of the season. I think their recent fall off has proof positive that even a hot team and a hot start, they've run into a bit of a wall with their production offensively. The Phillies are as close to a favorite in the National League. They have the best record in baseball, so why wouldn't you say that they're the best? As much as the Dodgers are 20 games over 500, they've survived pretty well without Mookie Betts, obviously. They've got some interesting flaws that I wonder if they'll be exposed again come October. And then it's a question of what these teams that are comfortable enough. Baltimore still needs pitching. They've got a whole bunch of injuries to their pitching staff. I'd be curious to see what a team like Kansas City does. They're right on the bubble, but I don't think there's really been a huge challenge from anyone else in the American League wild card. As far as the National League goes, I agree with you. It's a complete mess. What do you do if you're one of these teams that's just below the cut line and you're hovering at 500 or a couple games below? You can't, in any conceivable fashion, say you're a contender. You want to go all in. You want to buy.
Well, how much, Alex, how much is what like Arizona does last year, tinker with you, where they won like 85 games and you're like, we won to the World Series. So I guess those teams are in such a conflicting situation.
I think it changes the mindset completely. I think the last 2 years, really, where you've seen these wild card teams go deep into October, it's changed the dynamic where postseason baseball really was a battle of strength on strength for so many years. And you saw very few shocking surprise stories, Cinderella stories go through. Now it's almost, and we'll see, if we get 3 years of the same, then we'll know that this is more than just a couple-year blip with this format. But I'm convinced that this new format has turned it into more of a tournament, like the Stanley Cup playoffs in the NHL, where just make it and you've got a shot. Especially with the short nature of the wild card series. You only need, in theory, 3 starting pitchers there, 3 starting pitchers in the division series. You figure things out if you get to the championship series. I mean, it doesn't take much anymore. You don't need to have a rotation 4 guys deep to make a postseason run. If you get hot at the right time, if you hit the long ball at the right time, you can win in October. It's totally changed the way, and front offices will admit this too, it's totally changed the way that they prepare for playing in October.
Alex Faust, Apple TV Plus. It's the Phillies and the Braves. Should be a fun weekend, 4th of July weekend. Everybody down the shore getting ready for the matchup, and Alex will have the call for you Friday night, Apple TV Plus. Alex, good catching up with you, man.
We appreciate you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Great breakdown. Good kind of overview of the National League. The playoffs, though, he brought up an interesting, Alex used to be the play-by-play voice for the LA Kings, and he's done a lot of hockey work. It's like the tournament in hockey, the 8 seed, the 7 seed, these teams are winning. It's getting crazy. Hockey, when was the last time the best team ends up winning the whole thing? That's what baseball's turning into. So the Phillies, even though they have run out and become the best team in baseball, it's not a fait accompli that the best team in baseball just wins. And the Phillies fans, we know that. In 2011, they were the best team. They didn't get it done. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SB Live. Thanks to Alex Faust, the play-by-play voice for Apple TV Plus. Yes, Friday night, Apple TV Plus. Phillies, Braves. Saturday, we have Phillies Braves coverage at 6:30 on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill, and this is the Sports Bash.
It's the
Save big this summer with great deals. All in the Baker's app. Get juicy California yellow peaches or nectarines for 99 cents a pound with your card and a digital coupon. Then get 10 for 10 on items like Lay's Stacks, Rice-A-Roni, and Sparkling Ice Sparkling Water for $1 each with your card. Shop these deals at your local Kroger today or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
With Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
3:54 Sports Bash. So what's the traffic look like out there right now? Anybody fill us in on what the traffic looks like?
I know for me, coming from K-May to Atlantic County, it was congested.
Like right now, if you're driving south on the Parkway at like the Summers Point Ocean City exit.
Yeah.
Like that Parkway toll.
Yep.
So you have the decision to get off and go to Ocean City or keep going south to like Wildwood, Cape May.
Yep.
What's the traffic right there look like right now? 609-403-0973. If you're sitting in the... I got a text earlier from our buddy Jeff in Ocean City.
Yeah.
Did you see that text?
I did not. What'd he say?
He sent a picture of the traffic. He said, looks like a 2-hour drive from Philly to Ocean City right now. I have the Sports Bash on the whole way. There's a picture, and it is bumper to bumper.
Sounds about right. Not surprising.
That was at 2:26. He sent that.
Mike, the number.
Jeff in Ocean City, update us. That was 2:26. It's almost an hour and a half ago.
Let me get the update. Where
are you, Jeff? Give me an update.
Where are you at right now?
Give me the update on the traffic, Jeff. All good, but the islands are packed. Got a text message that says, I would imagine the islands are packed. I want no part. In fact, I was supposed to go over to Ventnor tonight, and I'm almost happy that I don't, but my alternative now is I have to go to Upper and zero parking. Yeah, there's no parking. I can imagine. It's Wednesday at 3:55, and there's no parking already on the island.
They're here.
Jeff in Ocean City, I need the update. Football at 4 is next.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
Just hungry to bring back another Lombardi to Philly. The fans deserve it. Our team deserves it. Culture begs for it.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, gridlock, the traffic, although our boy Jeff in Ocean City has revealed that he reached Ocean City in 2 hours from the U of Penn to the beach in Ocean City. Thanks for the picture, Jeff. As he says, the traffic's moving quite nicely. It's the toll area that is a little backed up. But if you have, the Easy Pass thing, you should be able to go there. Although if you're the guy who goes over the Margate Bridge and you don't have the toll card and you go to that and don't have the toll card, don't be that guy on this trip, okay? I got stuck behind that guy yesterday. He didn't have the bridge card. There's nobody to man the toll, so someone has to come from the thing. Come on, we got to keep the flow moving here. We got to keep the flow moving here, Jeff Mosher, and that includes the flow of Football at 4 on the Wednesday before 4th of July. I don't like the 4th of July being on a Thursday. It sets up pretty poorly for us down here, where you have people coming Wednesday, staying Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday now. Don't be that guy, Jeff Mosher.
It might be a little bit too late for that. But I wouldn't be that guy that you just described on the Margate Bridge. We use the Easy Pass. We're good.
Well, you can't use the Easy Pass on the Margate Bridge. You got to get
that's right.
You got to get the bridge card, but they only have 2 lanes, and one of them is for people who just have the card. But
right.
It's like some people don't realize it, and then they go there, and there's nobody to man the booth, and then you're sitting there, and that really is. My buddy told me he waited 40 minutes to get over that bridge yesterday. 40.
Yeah, that could drive me a little batty if I had to do that. I understand that.
Yeah. All right, so I want to get into a bunch of stuff with you. I was on Birds 365 this morning with McMullen, and he posed some interesting topics that we kind of brought up together. Now, the other day we had talked about how Darius Slay thought that Nolan Smith will be the surprise, that he'll be a surprise player for this team. And I asked John what he thought about that, and me and you talked about it the other day. He has a hard time with it because he thinks he's going to be blocked by Bryce Huff getting onto the field. And he's told me over-under of sacks, 14.5 for Huff. He's taking the over. So do you look at Huff as a player that, 1, will have that kind of year, and 2, will be blocking Nolan Smith again from getting on the field?
I don't. Yeah, I think you have to take into account the new defensive coordinator here and the type of roles that Vic Fangio will have for certain players and how to use them and where to line them up. And I mean, if we're going to take a guy like Zach Vaughn, who's really not played a ton on defense, and has really been more of an edge rusher, and look at him and say, hey, this guy is inside linebacker along with outside linebacker versatility. I can't look at Nolan Smith and just say, well, he's only going to line up over left tackle or only going to line up over right tackle. I look at it in terms, Mike, of 4-man rush. On 3rd and 5, can you put Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith on the field at the same time and have them be on opposite edges, kick somebody inside, or just take Josh Sweat off the field if he's not effective and have Jalen Carter and Brandon Graham inside? Yeah, you can do that, especially Nolan Smith is doing a good job of getting after the quarterback. I guess I can understand John's point if we're assuming that Josh Sweat picks it up from last year and your top two edge rushers are Huff and Sweat, then Nolan Smith's got a little bit of an uphill climb and a point to prove here. But I always say the contract tells you what the team and what the league is thinking. And Josh Sweat took a massive pay cut and basically is on a 1-year deal here, last year of his deal. And Nolan Smith is a guy that Nick Sirianni has said we have to play him and our younger guys. So I don't think it's going to be that much of an impediment as long as Nolan Smith comes to camp healthy, strong, developed. I do think adding weight or adding bulk muscle is something he has to do to get on the field more and be a 3-down player. But, right now we're just talking about, is he going to be a part of the pass rush?
Last year in Miami, Jeff, they had Andrew Van Ginkel down there. He kind of came out of, had a big year, breakout type of season. Is there a player on this roster? Coaches get into these like, hey, this is my guy. I have this guy on my team who can be my version of that guy. Do you see a guy on this team that could be that type of player where he kind of comes out of nowhere? Hey, there's that Andrew, like where Vic Fangio says, that's the guy there that I can do with him with what I did with Van Ginkel.
Yeah, I just mentioned him with Zach Bond only because, and it's sort of, the comparisons are a little eerie because they're both Wisconsin guys, right? And they both didn't do much until Vic Fangio was the defensive coordinator. Not that Bond has done anything yet, but you're asking me, like, could he be a breakout guy? Yeah, he could be a guy, especially because they're working him at two spots, inside and outside linebacker, mostly inside during the OTAs, but his natural position is really rushing the passer from the edges. And the way Vic Fangio's defense is designed, or at least what he started doing last year and recently, is a little bit more of those what we call sim pressures, where you're dropping your edges but rushing an inside linebacker. So you could see more blitzes from your inside linebackers this year. I say blitzes, it's really still just a 4-man rush, but that it's kind of what the old zone blitz used to look like under Dick LeBeau with the Steelers, just a little bit different now. So he could be a guy. He could also be a guy who completely is just a special teamer because it didn't work out the way they saw it.
Jeff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. Get the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. Jeff, you just mentioned the word blitz, which is a music word to Eagles fans' ears. But Vic Fangio, the third coordinator in a row who doesn't generally like the blitz all that much. But one of the guys we found interesting is Devin White. He's an inside linebacker guy who did have 9 sacks one year. Is there a way that they can utilize his skill set in that role a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, there are personnel people in the NFL who will tell you that as his career has gone on and he's come back to earth a little bit from being an All-Pro and into being benched last year, that his best skill set as an inside linebacker is rushing the passer. He just has a really good nose for it. You mentioned he had 9 sacks. And some of the other responsibilities of linebacker, coverage, run, have been areas in the last year or two where he hasn't excelled like he did earlier in his career. But rushing the passer has always been one of his strengths, and that's why he, for a couple of years there, looked really good in a Todd Bowles defense where he was asked to do that. Not from the edges, obviously, although, Todd moves everybody around. I'm sure he stunted. I'm sure he played line games and did attack from the edges, but we're talking about blitzing from an inside linebacker position. So if that's his strength and that's what he does really well, and Vic Fangio is known for putting players in positions where they can succeed, I think it stands to reason we'll see Devin White used in that way, especially if they think that he's, still not over some of the issues in the last year or two that have not made him a great coverage linebacker or a run linebacker. If they feel like his best attribute is just rushing the passer, maybe they use him in that regard.
He's an because I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but I enter with low expectations there. And, one of the things I think John brought up this morning to me, his PFF grades over the last 5 years, he's been like the 65th or lower rated linebacker out of 82 every year he's been in the league. And that includes when he's been an all-pro. The one year he was, he had 9 sacks. And you can make an argument, Moshe, that Devin White on that Buccaneer defense that won the Super Bowl, he might have been the best player at times on the field for them.
Yeah, I mean, he was surrounded by some really good talent and obviously some excellent coaching that likes that kind of player and knows how to use that kind of player to his maximal abilities, So yeah, there's talent in there, Mike. I mean, there's ability, there's athleticism for sure.
Yeah.
But there's got to be discipline. There's got to be fundamentals. There's to be technique. And that's big. So in order for those things I mentioned to be recognized, those last 4 things I mentioned have to be in place first.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, going back to the Darius Slay thing, and we talked about this on Monday, I think, when you were on, that he talked about the lack of communication in the secondary from all the different safeties and all that. He mentioned that having Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back, that should really add another huge dimension to the secondary that was lacking last year. I think we take for granted sometimes talent or lack thereof, but the communication thing, how big of a factor that could be, even if you have a really good player back there.
100% we take it for granted. Some people, it's often taken for granted. And I think last year was a perfect example of that. I think that people who follow the team were pretty excited about the idea of Reed Blankenship year 2 right next to Terrell Edmonds. And that sounds like talent because you saw Reed play well, and that Terrell Edmonds was a first-round pick who started 5 straight years on the Steelers defense. But it wasn't. And we at Inside the Birds told people that this is not going to be a strong point, and in fact could be a real weakness to the point where Terrell Edmonds could be a detriment to the defense. And he was. He was a detriment. He didn't even start, if you remember, by the time the season opener came along. And then when he had to play, you could really see the exposure there. So C.J. Gardner-Johnson knows the defense, is a more natural fit for the scheme that Vic Fangio wants to play. He can rotate. He can play deep post. He can play inside. Now, he's not a great tackler. So at times we saw a couple of years ago in the run game, you can run, and if you get through him, you can get past him. But you'll take that for his ability to be a good traffic cop in the backfield and to also flip the field at any moment with an interception.
Should be interesting to see how that secondary emerges. We've been talking a lot about that. Jeff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. By the way, the Jets 2 weeks away from opening up their training camp. And, of course, the Eagles are officially, 20 days away from opening, having their camp report as well. One thing I want to ask you about, I didn't get to see the Giants Hard Knocks last night. Did you watch any of it at all? Have you seen any of the clips?
I know this is the annual question that you're asking me about if I saw this on Hard Knocks, and my annual reminder, I don't think I've watched Hard Knocks.
No, well, come on, whoa. No, this is a different Hard Knocks, though. I
know, it's the off-season one.
This is the off-season one. I mean, I haven't watched the old the older version, the training camp versions, but this one intrigues me a lot. But the Giants stuff is interesting. Have you been seeing the dynamics of the whole Saquon Barkley conversation between the GM and Mara, the owner? Like, that whole dynamic is pretty interesting to watch. And then the GM trying to stand up for Daniel Jones. I think I want to see it. I haven't seen it yet, but I have seen a lot of the clips.
Yeah, you know what? I'm interested in seeing it, and because what you're talking about, I've only seen little snippets myself. I really should figure out what streaming service, what time, and what day the show comes on.
It's on HBO. It's on HBO Max, which I do not have either.
HBO Max. I think I might have that, so I might be able to look into that at some point. But I don't watch a whole lot of TV, Mike. So if I never catch it, that would be if you were doing like handicapping odds here, gambling odds. I would definitely be
okay.
A minus 140 to never see it.
Well, listen. I don't watch a lot of TV either, but I have seen the clips all over social media. They've been everywhere. A lot of the dynamics there. There's the one clip where it's Bean, Schoen, and Who's the other G? I forget. It's Carolina.
Joe
Shane, and Bean and Dan Morgan from Carolina. The three of them are all standing together on the sideline somewhere. I'm assuming it's like the Senior Bowl or something.
You would figure, yeah.
And they're just like shooting the breeze, and the guy's like, you want to move up in the draft? And the interesting part is, like, the guy from Buffalo's like, we can't afford a top 10 pick. Like, you never think of that dynamic when trying to make a trade, is that we don't have the money to be able to afford picking in that spot in the draft. So that was one interesting thing. The other thing that was interesting was, I think it was almost like in passing, the guy's like, you interested in Brian Burns for 2 first-round picks? And the guy's like, no, but yeah. And like the next thing you know, the trade is like formulated from these 3 guys just like shooting the breeze on the sideline there.
Yeah, it is funny. Some of the stories I've heard of how trades or significant signing, things like that have. I think Howie Roseman once, pretty sure he said this in a press conference or maybe a bunch of reporters on a trade that he pulled off with Baltimore. Maybe the Tim Jernigan deal from 2017, where he was talking about being at his Florida house. He has a house on the Panhandle. And I think he's practically neighbors with Ozzie Newsome, who was then the general manager of the Ravens, right? And, they see each other on the beach all the time. They're neighbors. They're down there. They're on vacation. And obviously they're talking football a lot. And bam, next thing you know, you get a trade, and the Eagles get Tim Jernigan, and the Ravens and the Eagles, I think, switched spots in a certain round, and there was another. But that's where the origins of the trade came from. I think that was the trade. It might have been a different one, but that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's the whole the guy from Buffalo was the one who said they couldn't afford a top 10 pick. It's not in our budget to pay a guy, so no, we can't move into the top 10. Who's that? Billy Bean? Not the guy from the
Billy
A's.
Bean.
Yeah,
Brandon Bean.
Brandon Bean, right? Yeah. Brandon Bean. He was the one there, but it was Dan Morgan asking Joe Shane, like, hey, you interested in Brian Burns for 2 picks? He's like, no, but yeah. And and then the funny part is, the voice guy for those Hard Knocks, and they hit it, and he's like, was that just a subtle offer of Brian Burns, all-pro linebacker? And they show his sacks and highlights, and it's and here's how the trade is consummated. But there's that dynamic, and then the whole thing where it sounded like John Mara wanted to keep Saquon Barkley, but Joe Shane, the GM, is almost having to explain to him why it's not smart. And can you imagine having the job where the owner is like that? He's like, why are we not keeping this guy? And you have to explain to him well, we don't want to spend $20 million on that position.
Right. Well, I'm sure that actually happens
all the time
with every single franchise. Yeah, including the Eagles. I'm sure that Howie has to. I've heard Howie has to explain some things to Jeff when Jeff wants to do A or B, and Howie says, no, hold on. We need to do C or D instead.
Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. All of you out there are going to be on the beach this weekend. Take the Inside the Birds podcast with you. Download it on all podcasting platforms. And you got your division previews. You guys are taking a look at the NFC East with Cosell. And, of course, that's always good stuff. Greg Cosell does a great job. So everybody out there listening, download the podcast. And, of course, check out their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. All right, Jeff. Happy 4th, man.
Happy 4th to you as well. Talk to you soon.
And make sure you go through the right lane on the bridges. You don't want to be the guy who's in the wrong lane on the bridge. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. So Josh, did you watch the Hard Knocks last night? Don't tell me no.
I will tell you no, because I don't have Max.
I thought you did have Max.
I used to. I got rid of Xfinity.
I thought for sure you would have said, I watched it.
I don't have Xfinity anymore. I got rid of them, what was that, 6-7 months ago? That was part of my bundle. I had all these apps bundled into the Xfinity.
So I didn't see it. I've been seeing a lot of the clips, but I definitely want to watch it because the clips I've seen have definitely pulled me in. I want to see more of the conversation, more of there's a meeting between Mara, Joe Shane, and like a couple other front office guys, a high personnel guy, like a scout, yada, yada. And they're going through the different running backs they can get in the second week of free agency if Barkley leaves.
Right.
They're trying to convince Mara, like, not to panic. And he's like, well, he's been our whole offense. Like, what are we supposed to do without him? Like, he's like, you're going to have to convince me, because no one else on the offense has been able to do anything the last couple of years.
Absolutely. And I think, this is the Hard Knocks I am interested in, too. And I got to also figure out how I'm going to consume these episodes because, do I... See, the problem is I used to have Max already. So it's like, can I get a free trial if I already had Max? You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those like gray areas I got to figure out over here.
Well, my anticipation is like a lot of, for instance, the Who Killed WCW. Did you watch that?
I've seen it, but I haven't watched it.
On Vice.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It just was out. Like the fourth episode, it was a 4-episode miniseries. The last one was last week.
Gotcha.
So it was on Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock on Vice. I watch it like the next night on YouTube.
Gotcha.
So eventually, I guess it gets to YouTube, but I want to see it now. Like this morning, you know what you get? So you put in Hard Knocks Giants, and you get people who are watching Hard Knocks, and you're watching them watch the thing without.
I can't do that.
Without the picture. No,
I can't do that.
I can't do that either. But I'm saying, who the hell's sitting there watch somebody else watch the show, and you're not even watching the show? You're just watching them, comment on them watching the show.
See, that's that creepy voyeurism stuff I'm not a fan of. Like, there's people who do, like, they film themselves and they stream it them watching, like, the NBA Finals. Like, why do I care about fill-in-the-blank person, them watching the NBA Finals?
Speaking of the NBA, Alec Burks just signed with the Heat. Sorry. Lost my train of thought for a second. Alec Burks, former Sixer, played with the Knicks last year. He has signed with the Heat.
Your boy Joe Ingles is off the board, too.
Yeah, where'd he go? Minnesota?
He went to Minnesota.
See, Minnesota, a championship contender.
He rejoined Connolly and Rudy Gobert, his old Jazz teammates.
Smart move. I saw, what did he get? Did you see the contract?
I got to pull up again, though. It's a 1-year deal.
Yeah, let me know what the deal is, because I like Joe Ingles. I don't know if he's the same player anymore. I'm not saying that, but I like Joe Ingles. I thought he would have been a nice kind of just pain in the ass guy that you just a pain in the ass kind of guy. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SB Live.
1 year, $3.3 million.
Well, they could have fit him in. They had $9 million cap space, but hey, look, if they have a move that 9.2 or whatever it is still in play here, I'm intrigued. Coming up, Knicks Nuggets. What kind of nuggets Nick's going to have today? He won the flats and drums.
You're disappointed about that?
I'm disappointed.
What are you
in the
more
people.
disappointed about? Not getting Joe Ingles or losing the flats versus drums?
Flats and drums. I'm disappointed in the people out there. I thought I had sane people listening, and now I realize that most of my audience is, in fact, insane. If you are a flats over drums on the chicken wing, there's a screw loose. Something's missing up there. Now, the vote was close, so I do have some sane people. But if you're going flats over drums, I have a lot of questions for you.
Like that song Insane in the Membrane?
Cypress Hill.
There you go.
I'm Mike Gill, not Cypress Hill. Gill, not Hill. You know that at the Flyers drafted a guy named Gill.
He did.
Stud.
Not Mike Gill.
What number is he going to be? Do they have a jersey yet?
I haven't seen a jersey for him.
I'll have a Gill jersey. It'll replace my prop jersey behind me here.
Would you actually like...
Gaffa!
Would you actually wear the jersey ever?
No. It'll just hang on the wall.
Hang on the wall?
I have a Brian Propp, 1987 Flyers Stanley Cup jersey. Stanley Cup runner-up, by the way. Did not win the cup. I know that. Hanging on the wall behind us. For those of you on the live video, you can see it. All right. Knicks Nuggets are coming up next on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3.
We have the traffic.
You come with me.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
4:30 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform at 97.3 ESPN. Time for another edition of Nick's Nuggets with Nick Earnshaw here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN as we get ready for the 4th of July holiday. Well, Nick's Nuggets has one win under their belt. They've got the Flats over the Drums, which makes me concerned for the mankind of our listeners out there. I'm a little worried about what this weekend might look like if there's people out there in the audience that are Flats over Drums guys this week.
I am taking my victory lap, Mike, on this one. I saw the results. I was like, wait, I was counting down to see the results at what time they would come out, right? Like, because I remember when we were on the show yesterday doing the Nuggets, it was about like 40 minutes when we ended of time left to vote for the for Flats or Drums. And Flats squeaked it out. I mean, that says something to me. They use some really good listeners out there. The Drums people, we can save them eventually. We'll bring them over to the Flats side one, and we'll bring you over to the Flats side at some point, Mike. I mean, listen, I'll take the victory any way I can get it. It's a W, but you got some smart people out there. 53% voting on Twitter, texting in. Thank you for choosing my side, the right side of this debate here.
Yeah, 52.5% Flats, 47.5 Drums. What it tells me is that it's almost 50-50 there, and I was surprised. I thought for sure it would be a Drums world out there.
No. So are you going to have any drums this weekend for the 4th of July? Any barbecues you're going to? Are you going to be sticking drums on your plate, Mike?
I don't know. You know, it's funny. Like the fact that it's the 4th of July kind of snuck up on us so fast. Yeah, I have really not thought about what I'm doing. Now, generally, like, definitely avoiding the islands. Won't be over there. Going to hang away from there. No real plans for the 4th. Might just kind of be laying low for, like, tomorrow. Just have the day. I don't have a car right now. My car has been in the shop since my car has been in the shop. There's actually nothing wrong with it. So my car, I had no radio for the longest time.
You told me this.
I needed a radio update, and apparently it is like getting the national security codes to update the radio. They tried it the other day. They said that it did not work, the update that they did, and I just got a message actually about a half hour ago and said it's like 1/4 of the way done. So I won't have a car again because I can't get it today. Tomorrow closed, so it probably won't be till Friday. So you're talking about I had no car for a week.
Oh, man, that's brutal. Well, I have a radio story with the car, too. I'll tell it real quick. So when I was in high school, my first car ever, the radio would continue to run. It would continue to run throughout the day if I didn't take the radio fuse out of the fuse box. So I'm in the high school parking lot, my senior year of high school. I am lifting the hood up, taking the fuse box out every single time I want to play something in the car, whether I have my phone connected, whether I'm listening to the radio, anything. It would just continue to run. It killed my battery like twice. So that has happened to me. I've had radio issues with cars before, Mike, and it was embarrassing every single time. Had to lift the hood, take the fuse out. Girls will be asking me, hey, what are you doing lifting the hood for? I'm like, there's an issue with my radio. I mean, it deterred them away, to say the least. I mean, that's clearly what happened to me my senior year of high school. But pretty funny stuff with the radio. I totally it was awful that senior year when I had to up, down every single morning at 6 o'clock in the morning going to school. I got to take the fuse out. It's brutal.
How do you think I feel? I'm a guy who works in radio who has no radio in the car for the last, literally, I've been driving around for probably 2 months with no radio.
I feel your pain. I feel your pain for sure. All right, let's get into these Nuggets. Enough about our sob stories with our radios in the cars. We got to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies, okay? They had a big win last night over the Cubs in Wrigley. Michael Mercado, I mean, he was fantastic last night, Mike. Comes out of nowhere.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't tell me you want him replacing your boy Turnbull now.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's not where I'm going. I have another angle to this, Mike. I have another angle to this. All right. So the Phillies, they have eaten the Rays' lunch in trades recently. Dombrowski has hosed them on the Sanchez trade, the Alvarado trade, as well as the Mercado trade. He is finding gems from the Rays, and they just continue to send them to the Phillies. Now, I don't even think that's the best Phillies trade of all time with the Tampa Bay Rays. Do you remember in 1997 who the Phillies sent to get Bobby Abreu?
Was it Kevin Stocker?
It was Stocker. So they sent Kevin Stocker, who didn't, he didn't have a great end to his career with the Rays, but Abreu had a couple of pretty good years with the Philadelphia Phillies. He's on the Hall of Fame ballot right now. I thought that was the biggest hose they ever had from the Rays, but they continue to eat the Rays' lunch, Mike. I think the Rays got to stop trading with the Phillies because they beat them in the World Series in 2008. They keep taking all their good players from them that they develop. I mean, listen, the Rays are known for developing players, and the Phillies are just taking pieces from them and finding hidden gems. And, I got to give credit to fan-sided articles, Tom Mayer, for the inspiration for this nugget. He went deep dive on all these trades the Phillies have done over the past couple of years.
I like it. Listen, we were talking about this earlier. They made the Christopher Sanchez trade with the Rays, and people forget that was with the Rays. Alvarado was the guy that got from the Rays, the Bobby Abreu, and that's going deep into time there.
I found that one. That wasn't in the article. I went back and did my research on that one.
With the Rays. But, hey, I said for a while there, I know the Rays are not having a great year this year, but for a while there, with the lack of, the financial issues they have, the Rays were the best run organization. And now they never won a title, and they were never the most talented team. But for the financial constraints that they had, they were the best run franchise in baseball. I mean, even up until last year, still, they're still a pretty good team. This year, I think, Arozarena, who's been kind of their best player, he's not having a great year right now. They lost Glass now. So some of the key guys, they're starting to lose to those younger guys that carried them through some years. They just couldn't afford them anymore. It's a sad situation, that whole thing, where they just can't afford anybody. I mean, you're playing in a half-empty ballpark every single night.
Yeah, down in there in Tampa, St. Petersburg, actually. I mean, their stadium situation's a joke. I mean, I think they've been trying to get a new one for a long time now. Now, that makes me wonder, though, Mike, like with players that they've lost. They send Glass now to the Los Angeles Dodgers. You also have Arozarena, who's been thrown around in trade discussions. Maybe the Phillies, the track record they have trading with the Tampa Bay Rays, maybe you take a flyer on Arozarena, right? Maybe you can get him at a cheaper price. He comes here and he starts to play well. I mean, that seems to be every Tampa Bay Ray prospect, reliever that they send over here, Mike.
Yeah, well, hey, listen. Arozarena, at a time, he was one of my favorite players. He was awesome. He's been a playoff performer. But I'm not sure that I'm giving up anything of substance for him. And I think the Rays are going to want back something. He's 29 years old, so they might want something back. I'm not giving up Aiden Miller. I'm not giving up Justin Crawford. Mick Abel, I'm probably not going there. We giving up Griff McGarry for Randy Arozarena? You taking that shot?
Yeah, I would give up Griffin McGarry for Randy Arozarena. I would take a chance because he's still under 30. I mean, he's 29 years old. We've seen what he's done in the past. He has postseason experience, too. He's been really good in playoff spots. So I would give up a Griff McGarry. Maybe even an Abel at this point.
Abel's,
overpay. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been that great this year.
No, his ERA is like 6.50 at AAA. I mean, that's terrible. Arozarena was I'm a big fan of his. All these guys. I was reading something earlier at the Athletic. They did Major League deadline scenarios, questions. The question was thoughts on the Phillies with Lewis Robert, Jake McCarthy, Jazz Chisholm, that group of guys there. And he said they'll have to offer their best prospects, especially for Robert and Chisholm. And I'm not offering Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford for either one of those guys. To me, those guys are not – they're not proven enough home run, definitive, upgrades. You're hoping that Lewis Robert turns a corner, and I think Jazz Chisholm, even at his best, is just a okay player.
Yeah, I like Jazz. I don't know if I'm giving up an Aiden Miller or Justin Crawford, though. If that's what they have to give up, I would say no. I would say no on that. With Robert has been he has been considered like the best guy out there. Everyone wants the Phillies to go get him, give up whatever you have to do to get him over in the Phillies pinstripes. I'm not sold on Robert. He hasn't been great this year at all. He's not hitting at an elite clip. The injury history is there with him. I'm not sold on Robert either. I don't know why everyone is so sold on bringing him to the Phillies and giving up a massive amount to get him. I know the age. I know the contract. You're able to keep him for a couple more years and you have team control after this season. But I'm not sold on Robert this year. Does he help them right away? Like, you don't know if he's going to turn a corner right away.
No, the power, 38 home runs last year, I think is what has you intrigued. If it's not for that, he has not really done anything that really jumps off the page. And if they're going to ask for that much, you probably, I don't know. They're in a tough spot in terms of, we know they're going to make the playoffs. You've been to the playoffs 2 years in a row and been disappointed. What makes you a World Series team? And that's what Dave Dombrowski has to figure out.
Yeah, listen, I mean, he also brought in Nate Eovaldi when he was with the Red Sox in 2018. He traded with the Rays. So Dombrowski's been picking the pockets of Tampa Bay as well throughout his career, not just with the Phillies. So maybe you do kick the tires on Randy Arozarena. We'll see. We'll see what happens when the deadline rolls around. All right, nugget number 2, Sixers. Things have kind of slowed down a little bit. Middle of the night Morey, though. I mean, you're hearing the discussions now of Buddy Hield being signed and traded to the Golden State Warriors. Doesn't look like he will be back with the 76ers. Your guy, Joe Ingles, he goes to Minnesota, Mike. He's gone. He's off the board. Alec Burks is off the board. He goes to the Miami Heat. I mean, there's these guys you can get for like a lower price that are starting to sign elsewhere. Mike, you're the Sixers. What do you do next at this point? I think there's guys out there. I've mentioned Seth Curry multiple times. You bring back Andre Drummond. Why not bring back the whole trade of Ben Simmons? You bring Seth Curry back in on a minimum. There's going to be guys you can fill out the roster with. I don't know if there's that big move. The next big move is it going to be this offseason, or are we going to wait till the regular season starts and then that's when Morey kind of makes another move to put another piece around Embiid, Maxey, and Jordan?
Well, there's a lot of reporting out there right now as we're having this conversation. One, according to Keith Pompey, they're expressing interest in bringing back Marcus Morris Sr. He would be a nice fit as that 4-man. I mean, listen, he is what he is. He's older now, but he's a hustle guy. He's an energy guy, rebound, does the dirty work, stretch 4. They need a 4. Also, as Keith Pompey reported, the Sixers have had discussions with Hayward Highsmith, who was with the G League team. Was he there when you were with the G League team?
Yeah, he was.
He was with the Heat last year. They've also had discussions with the Heat free agent Caleb Martin. He's a guy I would like a lot. So there are some intriguing names that the Sixers are tied to. Dario Saric's name, I've heard that a little bit here. So I do think that Daryl Morey still has something. It's not going to be the big move, but it's going to be something that kind of is the glue to pull this whole thing kind of together. Because, look, you're going to have Embiid as your first option most nights. Maxey right there, 1A. Paul George, number 2 or number 3. Kelly Oubre, number 4. Eric Gordon as a guy who could fill it off the bench. This next guy doesn't need to be a scorer. What he needs to be is the pain in the ass, the rebounder, the tip pass, the get on the floor, the do the dirty work guy. And all those guys we just mentioned, Morris, Martin, Hayward, Highsmith, they all fit that bill.
Yeah, and you're going back to the Buddy Hield deal that they're trying to work on with the Golden State Warriors. Remember, the Sixers gave up a bunch of second-round picks. I believe it was 3 second-round picks for Buddy Hield this year to Indiana. They're able to recoup some second-round picks back. That helps them going into the season, right? If they need to make a trade at the deadline, add a piece here, add a piece there, that gives them more assets to go out and trade for somebody that they might want during the regular season or during the offseason. It doesn't matter. If they're able to get those picks back, I think that would be massive, whether it's 1 pick, 2 second-round picks. Apparently, they're at a premium because they're being traded all over the place during the offseason within the past year. So I think that would be huge if the Sixers can get like 2 second-round picks from Golden State in return for sending Buddy Hield out there to the Bay Area. I think that would be fantastic if you're the Sixers. some of these other names out there, yeah, Caleb Martin was somebody we mentioned earlier in the week, or was it last week? I can't remember, but we mentioned him here on the Nuggets. Like, Martin might be a guy to fit. Like, he was okay last year with the Heat. Maybe he could come off the bench for the Sixers. He's been in big games before. He's been down there with the Heat culture, right? You bring him in. That could be a nice option. Haywood Highsmith, been in the Sixers system, played for the Delaware Bluecoats when I was interning down there for a while. He was a massive piece. In the middle of the season, that's when the Heat grabbed him a couple years back. So there's still some names out there that fill out the roster that are intriguing. But that Buddy Hield scenario is really interesting, because if you get those assets back, that'll help them in trade discussions down the line.
Yeah, we talked about in the first hour too. Can they utilize the picks that they have and then add maybe some more picks to be a player? I suggested that maybe the next big move they make is before the trade deadline, a la getting OG Anunoby with the Knicks last year, Pascal Siakam going to Indiana last year, finding that guy who's going to be a free agent in next year's class and targeting them before the trade deadline, and that being the next big move. Finding that team that doesn't get off to a good start and is ready to move on from their free agent and saying that's going to be the guy that completes the puzzle.
Yep, I think that I would not put it past Daryl Morey for doing that and eyeing the later down the line. Okay, we can add a piece later in the season. We don't have to do it all right this second. We can mix and match right now, get some guys on cheaper contracts, have a little bit of cap room heading into the season. I wouldn't be shocked if they also did that as well. All right. Moving on, nugget number 3, real fast. I heard you and Josh talking about the Hard Knocks, the Giants. Those clips have been fantastic. Now, I haven't watched it either, Mike. I don't even know if I have Max anymore. I don't know what subscriptions I do or don't have, because there's so many at this point. But I do. I will sign up for the free trial, whatever you got to do, because I need to see that Hard Knocks of the New York Giants. We talked about it on the Nugs a couple of weeks ago. Now, did you see that A.J. Brown responded to some of the videos and clips going around from the Giants front office? I don't know if you saw this, Mike. So this is what A.J. Brown tweeted out today. The Saquon video fired me up, and it wasn't even about me. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you get yours, fam, at Saquon. So A.J. Brown saw the Hard Knocks, apparently.
Yeah, listen, I said, the Hard Knocks, this Giant thing is definitely intriguing, and because it involves so much about Saquon. Mara coming in, he wants to keep Saquon. The GM having to explain to him that that's probably not a good move. But look, the Giants were in a tough situation, but they were right to let Saquon walk, given the situation that they're in as a franchise. I mean, they put the money into the quarterback. You can't keep diving down the road of paying the running back here. You've got to protect. I think that whole sequence of him saying, look, Patrick Mahomes couldn't succeed behind this offensive line. Like, we had to at some point see what we have in this guy, and we've never given him a fair opportunity. We've never been able to protect him. I thought that was a really cool scene there, and kind of gives you a little insight on, hey, look, we have this quarterback. We drafted, we paid him money, but we've never given him a fair shot.
Yeah, it's really cool to see kind of the behind the scenes, the off season, and what goes into certain decisions. I don't know. It might be a little too much. If I'm a team, I'm like, this is a little too much to put out there. You have the owner coming in, kind of being like, I would like to kind of keep Saquon to be nice. Like, essentially, that's what Mara was saying. It's a lot. Like, who would have expected that we'd see this much behind the scenes in like negotiations, discussions, team strategy? Like, I feel like they're putting a lot out there on what they want to do. I mean, it's obvious that they haven't had a good offensive line, but like hearing it from their mouths, it's pretty funny to see.
Yeah, well, and look, I think for all the people out there, it doesn't matter if you're a fan of the Giants or not. The dynamic of hearing how these teams operate behind closed doors, I can't believe they gave the access that they did. And I haven't seen it, but just the few clips that are out there is enough to say, give me more. I'll take the whole season worth of this.
I'm all for it. I'm all for the Hard Knocks. I got to get the free trial, whatever I got to do. All right.
No, all right. So the free trial, do you have Apple Plus for the Phillies on Friday night?
Yeah, I got Apple. I know I have Apple because I've watched it this year. I have Apple. I use other people's accounts. I have my own accounts. I'm all over the place. I'm scattered on all these streaming platforms. It's crazy to keep up with. I had to go down my list again and see what I do and don't have, what I canceled and what I didn't cancel. It's all over the place, Mike. But before we go, I got to ask you, it is the 4th of July tomorrow. Now, I was recording a show, doing a stream earlier in the week on Monday, right? Doing a Sixers stream earlier. Do you think it's okay to shoot off fireworks before the 4th of July? Like, is this a faux pas to shoot off fireworks before the 4th? After the 4th, I can understand heading into the weekend. That's fine. But before, I'm doing a show, and all of a sudden, in my headphones, I hear fireworks going off in my neighborhood. What is going on?
I have no need for a firework ever. I don't get where people, like, when they're driving in a certain state and there's like a fireworks store and people get like so juiced up and they have to stop and buy the fireworks and they buy like a year's supply because you're in a state, I don't get fireworks do nothing for me.
No, I'm all in on the fireworks. I'm on to too early. We're too early. It's the 1st July. Just flip the calendar.
Right.
What are we doing?
I get it, but my point is, if I don't get the whole enamoring with the firework, I don't want it before the 4th of July. I don't need it on the 4th of July. Post 4th of July, I don't need the fireworks. To me, they do nothing for me.
So you're anti-firework completely then. So you don't want them anytime, anywhere, any place.
It's like when, okay, so back in the day when the Atlantic City Surf played here, right? Yep. The only way they could get anybody to go to a game is if they had firework night. So they had that firework night like every night of the week. I was like, is it that big of a draw that you have to go to a game just to see the fireworks?
I'll be honest. I'm a big firework guy. I enjoy fireworks, but there's a time and a place. You're doing it at a game. You're doing it on the 4th or the weekend after the 4th. That's fine, but the calendar just flipped. I'm trying to do a show here. Fireworks are going off. I'm like, what is going on? Don't do it before the 4th. No fireworks before the 4th of July. I'm out on before the 4th. After the 4th is okay. Heading into the weekend,
everybody has the neighbor in their neighborhood who shoots off the flare or the firework, and you're just it's Sunday night at 10 o'clock, and you just shot a firework off. Like, what's going on here? Right?
On the 4th of July, it's acceptable. But if it's not the 4th of July, I'm out. We don't need to. We don't need to.
All right. Happy 4th.
Happy 4th, Mike. I'll talk to you.
I hope the grand finale is a good one for you.
I hope it is, too.
That's Nick Earnshaw. Those are Nick's Nuggets. They're brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up on the 4th of July, Phillies and Cubs right here on 97.3 ESPN. That coverage starts at 1:30. Saturday, we have the Phillies and the Braves on 97.3 ESPN. And coming up next, Michael Kaskey-Blomane, our Sixers insider, our Sixers contributor from 97.3 ESPN.com, will give us his perspective on how Paul George fits in with the Sixers and which of the scenarios that are next does he like best? That's next. This is the Sports Bash.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill with you till 6 o'clock. Michael Kaskey-Blomane, our Sixers contributor, 97.3 ESPN.com, set to join us as we take a look at all of the stuff the Sixers have done and what could be next. He joins us now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. MKB, my brother, what's going on, man? Whoa, baby, you are muted there. Can you hear me now? You got me? MKB, you are muted. You got to unmute yourself there, I think, is part of the problem there. We'll try to get him back on here in just a second. Here, we'll try to get to MKB, talk a little Sixers with him as the Sixers obviously have added multiple pieces. Paul George, Eric Gordon, Andre Drummond, Kelly Oubre is back, Tyrese Maxey is back. What could be next for the Sixers? We'll try to hammer that all out here with MKB in just a second when it looks like his mic is muted, and that is the issue here. So if he can't hear me or I can't, what's going on, we'll try to clear that up here in just a second. But one of the things we discussed earlier is the fact that this team right now is not finished. It's not a finished product. Even though Paul George is here, even though Andre Drummond is here, and even though Eric Gordon is a piece, all of those pieces are guys that they could use. It's an unfinished product, and we're going to try to figure out what is the kind of next step for them. And I think we take a look at, Michael Kasky-Blomain covers the 76ers. He did nationally for CBS Sports. He's now, of course, writing for our website, 973ESPN.com. I think we got him on the phone now, so we'll talk to him through there. What's going on, my brother? How are you, man?
Hey, I'm doing well, Mike. How are you?
All is good, man. And, it's been a crazy 72 hours of free agency for the Sixers. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on the way they approach this. This almost seems like this was mapped out from the James Harden trade up until Sunday at 3:30 in the morning when they were able to get Paul George. They got Drummond and Eric Gordon. I want to get your take on how those pieces fit into this puzzle.
Yeah, I think they tried to do what they could do to maximize the years that Joel has left playing at a prime level. And I think it's honestly the best case scenario in terms of landing Paul George, given the other options that were available at this point in time. And, as you alluded to, this was a long process in the making, going back to, last offseason when they opted to only bring guys in on 1 year and minimum vet deals to make sure that they had, the cap space to land a player of the caliber of George. There was a lot of skepticism whether or not it would work. It clearly paid off. There's questions clearly and fairly enough about age and health moving forward for this team. But I think when you still have Joel, who just turned 30 years old, how much longer is he going to be able to play at a near MVP level? You do what you can do to maximize those remaining years while also locking up Tyrese Maxey on a max extension. So you have like a future plan built into, a team that's currently built to contend. So I think given the circumstance so far, I think they've done really well in free agency.
Yeah, so let me get your take on Paul George, his fit, what he will bring to this team. We talked about a lot, Tobias Harris, obviously that was a failure, the 5-year max deal that he got. He didn't obviously give you what you were hoping for. What does Paul George bring that Harris lacked?
I mean, on paper, Paul George is the perfect type of player that you fit into the Sixers team to complete like a triumvirate. You have the young star budding point guard in Tyrese Maxey, the established MVP, center in Joel Embiid. What the team has really been lacking, basically throughout the entire Embiid era, minus for the half season that Jimmy Butler was on the roster, was an elite two-way guy that could, lock down players on one end and then on the other end create offense for himself. Paul George is a great fit, too, because not only can he generate his own offense off the dribble and attack the rim and break down defenses, he's also become a really great catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. So, I mean, he's a guy that can operate with the ball when the Sixers need a basket and Joel's out of the game or Maxey's struggling. They can just give it to Paul to create offense. Or, you give it into Joel, he gets double-teamed. Paul George is a guy that knocks down threes at like a 40% clip off the catch-and-shoot. So he's an ideal guy to fit, and he's pretty kind of like the prototypical wing player in today's NBA, a guy that a lot of other players, I think, want to mold their game after in terms of just the overall. He doesn't really have a weakness in his game. He's kind of smooth and just good overall. The only concerns on my end, obviously, are the ones that other people have already voiced in terms of, he's obviously on the back end of his career, 34, 35 years old, 4-year max contract, and he's a guy that's dealt with some injury issues. So now you have, 2 of your key pieces here that have a pretty lengthy history with injury issues, which is obviously a concern. But on paper, if they can stay healthy, to me, it's really an ideal addition to complement what they already had in place with Embiid and Maxey.
Yeah, you got Paul George, 34 years old, Embiid, 30, as you said. To me, it's like, hey, we're taking a crack with two guys or one guy in George who has some experience instead of going, with a lot of these, 1-year unproven guys. Is it the best possibility? It was the only possibility. There was really nothing else you could do here. So you take your chance, see what happens. But you further that chance, Michael, by getting Drummond earlier in the day, and that kind of set the tone for everything. I know you and a lot of others, you tweeted about it or X'd about it or posted about it or whatever the heck you're calling it these days, but mentioned Drummond. When they traded him the first time, they have not replaced him. They didn't have a backup center before him or after him. He was the best guy. But that almost is as important as getting that other guy like George was getting someone to solidify that position.
100%, Mike, and I think you saw it last season when Joel missed so much time. The Sixers, really struggled in terms of their size, their rebounding, and it hurt them in the standings, which ended up hurting them in the postseason positioning, which really ended up determining their season. And like you said, Drummond was a guy that you can feel good about putting in. I mean, he's not obviously nearly as skilled offensively as Joel is, but he's a guy that comes in, rebounds at a really high rate, can protect the rim a little bit. And the Sixers technically never wanted to get rid of him. He was included in that Nets trade. He had spoken since about how much he liked playing here. So it really just seemed like a natural fit. He's going to get opportunity here just by default in terms of Joel's, I'll know he's going to miss some games. He's going to rest some games. He's going to, be out. The opportunity is going to be there for Andre Drummond, and he's really a perfect fit and a safety blanket for the Sixers team. Because at the end of the day, Joel's health, as we all know, come April, May, June, is paramount to this team having success in the postseason, and getting a reliable big guy like Drummond, in theory, should help to preserve Joel over the course of the 82-game regular season to hopefully keep him fresh as possible for that playoff run.
Yeah, big time, because, if you lose Embiid for the extended amount of time that you did last year, you wouldn't fall from, I think they were the 3 seed at that time, all the way into the play-in game. I mean, having Drummond should allow you to stay, a competitive team. And, with Paul George and Maxey, having that guy that can play the center position, definite upgrade. What happens with Paul Reed in your mind now? He was the backup last year, along with Mo Bamba, who, by the way, signed with the Clippers.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. I know there's been some reports that the Sixers are looking to move him. I could really see it going either way. I've never been the biggest Paul Reed guy. But now that you have Andre Drummond in place and that he would not be relied upon to be the backup center, keeping him around as a depth big guy, forward/center type utility guy on a reasonable contract, to me wouldn't be the end of the world. But I also would not be shocked to see them. You want to dump out that salary to bring in guys that fit a little bit better in terms of floor spacing around Embiid. I think they've afforded themselves a little bit of flexibility in that regard with the Drummond signing, just because he's, the clear-cut backup now. But to me, initially, I thought they would bring Paul Reed back. At this point, it's looking like it wouldn't be surprising if he was has already played his last game in a Sixers uniform.
Let's go to Eric Gordon. I mean, he gets kind of shoved under the radar a little bit here. To me, that's a huge signing for a couple of reasons, MKB. It's one, this guy's not afraid of the moment. I mean, in those Houston games when Harden went away, it was really Gordon who kept them in and took a lot of big shots in those games for the Rockets. So having that guy off the bench and can fill it up and is not afraid on nights where someone doesn't have it, that's something that this team has kind of lacked. We always talk about, hey, last year we thought this team had depth. Well, when push comes to shove, playoff time, Buddy Hield had not been in the playoffs, and he didn't have it every night. Eric Gordon's a guy who won't be afraid of the playoff moment.
And he has the experience, too, like you alluded to, a lot of playoff experience under his belt on a lot of really good teams. And he's played with a lot of really good players over the course of his career, so he kind of knows that secondary role, playing off ball and kind of just being ready, like you said, to seize a moment, whether it's, an off night for the stars on the team or just they're getting a lot of attention from the defense, and he's out there to knock down shots. He's still, a guy that on any given night could heat up and hit 5 or 6 threes and give you 20 points in a swing, situation to determine the outcome of a game and potentially like a playoff situation. The only downside is obviously with some of these other Sixer signings, he's clearly on like the back end of his career, a little bit older, but given the role that he's supposed to play with this team, I agree. Like on paper, it's a great signing, as is, everything they've done so far. I think in theory makes sense as long as they can, keep their legs together and stay out on the floor. It is a great addition that fits well along the other guys.
Yeah, he fills a big need for them because they really didn't have that guy off the bench. It's always kind of been, who's that other guy? Because Oubre was that guy, and then he kind of jumped into the starting lineup. How important to you was bringing Oubre back?
Yeah, and I was almost somewhat surprised. I knew they wanted to bring him back, but I think he probably boosted his own stock last season more than any other player that was on a minimum deal with how well he played for the Sixers throughout the season. Especially when Joel went down, he was the one guy that I think really tried to step it up offensively. So being able to bring him back in addition to these other things where he's now, a guy that's your fourth offensive option probably behind an Embiid, a Maxey, and a Paul George. And now we're talking about, Kelly Oubre, 2 years removed from averaging 20. Sixers fans saw what he was capable of last year. He's a great guy to have in that fourth role as an offensive option. Another guy that if he gets out on any given night, he could put up 20, 30 in the blink of an eye. So he's a weapon for them to have. Clearly was well liked by the fans in Philly. He liked playing here. So for them to be able to get him back at a somewhat reasonable price tag too, I think was another one. Like you said earlier, Paul George, the signing, got most of the headlines, and deservedly so. But these other deals, Drummond, Gordon, and bringing back Oubre, I think are all really solid, important moves for the team.
Yeah, so that's where they are now, and obviously the Maxey move, he's back into the fold as we knew that was going to happen. But I want to get your take before we move on, Mike, to what could be next. Is Morey's role in all this and how he kind of mapped this out and what he was able to do. A lot of people were wondering, and maybe we think Morey hasn't done a good job. What do you think of the way that Morey has played this and his role to get them to where they are right now?
Yeah, I think it's fair definitely to question how successful he's been since he came here, but I do think this, maybe it's a kind of prisoner of the moment thing, but I think the plan that he's had dating back to last offseason where he kind of surveyed the landscape, saw how things would be, was able to delay the extension for Maxey, bring him in order to, free up other space, land a third star on paper that really complements the team well. I think he's done the best, this offseason so far to really maximize. They're in a tough spot, obviously, with Joel aging, the injury issues. It's kind of been a tough team to build around. I think he's done a good job, and obviously that Maxey extension is, kind of the thing in the background that, you go all in now with Joel and Paul George for the next, 2-3 years as the main duo as Maxey continues to grow and develop. You have him locked up as a guy that you can kind of transition and pass the torch to moving forward after this run with these two guys. So I think he's done a good job of maximizing the present while also keeping an eye on the future of the franchise. I think, drafting the guys that they drafted might not play a huge role for the team coming up this year, but could, they were high talent, high prospect guys, best available type guys. Maybe they have some future in the team. So I think he's done a good job of balancing the present and the future of the franchise as long as these guys can stay healthy. He's given them a shot to contend, which I think is all you can really ask for.
So here they are, and this is what they have. Obviously, the George move, the Gordon move, the Drummond move. They bring back Oubre. What still needs to be done?
Well, they definitely need another backup point guard. I think a lot of signs indicate that Kyle Lowry might be back in that role. If not, Tyus Jones is a guy that I would really like them. But I think you need, obviously, Maxey's going to be starting in that role. But it's really important to have a reliable veteran guard running that second unit to keep things flowing when Maxey's on the bench or Joel's on the bench. And then I think they'll try to fill out the roster with, versatile two-way guys. There's been reports that they were interested in Finney Smith from Brooklyn. He's a kind of a two-way 3-and-D type guy. I think that's probably the prototype of what they'll be looking for. Maybe a Markieff or a Marcus Morris type guy. Maybe they look to bring back Robert Covington. Just guys to complement because they obviously now have that core in place with their, big three, for lack of a better term. And then you got, the backup big guy already locked up in Drummond. Oubre is a real nice, and Gordon is nice complementary scorers. I think now you just need to kind of get, tough-nosed defenders and guys that can knock down open shots, I think is what they'll prioritize. And potentially with the roster that they have in place, maybe they'll have a little bit easier time getting some of these, some veteran guys to come and play for minimum or cheaper salaries for the chance to, contend for a title and play for a team as talented as Philadelphia's roster is now.
Yeah, a couple guys, I think you mentioned Morris. He's a guy that was here, obviously, and then he's been kind of in the mix there. Caleb Martin's name has been reported out there. Hayward Highsmith, who was actually here before. Caleb Martin would be the most interesting group of that group to me. He's a guy that kind of this team has kind of lacked. Kind of a guy that when you play against him, he's always a pain in your butt. To get a guy like that on your team, Highsmith you had here at one point, he's kind of turned into a player down there in Miami after he was in the G League here. But those guys there, if they were able to get Martin out of that group, would that be a guy that you would see, as like a starting level player?
Yeah, potentially, Mike. I think he's a guy that could kind of slide into almost like a DeAnthony Melton type role in Philly where he's, an off-ball guy that can space the floor, and then you can rely on him to do some of the dirty work like you alluded to. He's a good man-to-man defender, pretty good rebounder for, the size in his position, and he's a guy that could slide in because they don't need, another high-powered star necessarily or a guy that's going to put up big numbers from that fifth starting spot when you already have, guys like Maxi, Oubre, Paul George, and Joel, that fifth role is, but they really need a versatile two-way, like a defender. And I think Caleb Martin, would fill that role really well. There's a couple other guys like Gary Trent Jr. is out there, Isaac Okoro, Malik Beasley, guys like that they could potentially get on a reasonable salary that have shown, in big moments that they can knock down shots and get busy defensively. I think that's probably the route they'll look to go.
Michael Kasky-Blomain, 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the 76ers. Any shot in your mind they can get creative and do something that is not expected?
I think that so much of what they were hoping to do was tied up in being able to land Paul George, and I think there was a lot of, even within the organization, some skepticism whether or not it would happen. I think that was the big domino. I don't know, what else like super splashy they could do. I think most likely we'll see, just the basic, bringing some of the guys back, bringing some guys off on, shorter veteran deals. Maybe they get a little bit creative. Obviously, there was reports of a Buddy Hield sign and trade and opening up some space to land. I think Karis LeVert was a name that I saw mentioned, or, a couple others. I think that's possible. But to me, the most likely outcome for the rest of the offseason is that they feel really good about the core they have in place now, and they want to maximize those guys with complementary pieces that fit, around them.
LeVert would be interesting. I saw Dinwiddie's name. I don't know that he's been tied. I wonder what he would cost. But Dinwiddie, if he could still play a little bit, he was a guy who killed you a couple of years ago. I know he's been kind of hurt recently, but if he was still a guy as a backup, ball handler type of guy, a guy who could score a little bit, I would be intrigued there. LeVert, it's the first time I've heard that name. He's a guy who can still get a bucket. I mean, he's a high-volume three-point guy, not a great three-point guy, but he would be an interesting guy off the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone like that, obviously, there's some talk about Miles Bridges. From what I've heard, the team is not interested in making that happen. From a talent-wise perspective, he's probably one of the best guys still left on the market, but I don't think the Sixers are going up that way. I'm sure they're not interested in DeRozan at this point. He's probably the best, the biggest name left still out on the market. So, it'll be interesting. I think they obviously still would be open to something like that, but I think moving forward, we'll probably just see some, regular moves, nothing too splashy.
Right now, the conversation, we know Boston is the favorite. Who do you like number 2? Do you like what the Knicks have done this offseason, or do you like where Philadelphia is?
I definitely think the Sixers have a higher ceiling, objectively, given, the Knicks obviously got the best of the Sixers in the playoffs. The addition of Mikal Bridges is, certainly going to help them. That's a really tough combination of two-way guys between him and Anunoby on the wing. It's going to be really difficult to score on them. But, if you look at the roster, obviously I think Joel is clearly still the best player. And then you have two guys in Maxey and Paul George who, I think you would probably take ahead of Jalen Brunson, who's the best player on the Knicks. So I think at the end of the day, the Sixers have a higher ceiling than them. At the end of the day, there's more risk in terms of probably health with the Sixers now, as they're probably going to enter the season next year as one of the older teams in the league, given their roster currently construction. But the Sixers, the Knicks, and the Pacers, I think will all be right in that conversation. For that second spot. A couple other squads, the Magic obviously will be try to get better with the addition of KCP. So on paper, it'll depend on what they do for the rest of the offseason. But I do think the Sixers got themselves right back in that conversation for the top of the East behind Boston.
And by the way, the Sixers showing interest in Marcus Morris, according to Keith Pompey. So they have interest in bringing him back. KJ Martin, if they brought him back, is he a guy that would get rotational minutes with what they have right now?
Yeah, I think so, actually, Mike. That's an interesting name. He hasn't really been talked about much at all, but I think he showed enough last season. Nick Nurse used him in situations where he could be a backup power forward off the bench. He brings pretty high motor on the glass, which is something they need. Obviously you'd like him to develop more offensively a little bit, but I think especially given the rate, the market price for him, what he might cost, he could be a guy that they could probably bring back on the relatively cheap and that they would feel, I think, decent about. Not playing big minutes, but if he's a guy that's coming in giving you 8 to 12 a night in that backup forward spot, I could definitely see that happening.
All right, a lot that could still happen. Of course, NBA free agency, a lot of stuff have happened. We obviously saw Clay go to Dallas and Hartenstein go to Oklahoma City. I think the Hartenstein to Oklahoma City, man, I think it's a huge loss for the Knicks, Michael, and I think that Oklahoma City, that is just what the doctor ordered for them.
Yeah, that team is definitely setting themselves up. And importantly for the Sixers, I do think that's a big loss for the Knicks. He was huge for that team. even in the series against the Sixers, just getting rebounds, hitting what seemed like every single shot from inside the paint. He's a guy that does a lot of that small stuff. And now the Knicks are a smaller team when you talk about matching up with, obviously it's tough to match up with Joel, but they have great depth and great defensive players on the wings. Losing him, I think, is a big blow, even if you get Randall back and you still have Mitchell Robinson. I think that is a big one. And for the Thunder, I mean, that's a young team that was great this year, and I think with that addition and the development of their young guys, wouldn't be surprising at all if we were talking about them at the top of the West, potential finals, Western Conference Finals team next season at all.
Yep. Yeah, they were the 1 seed, but I think they were missing that guy. The tough guy. That was one of their problems. They just couldn't. They were small, fun team, young team. Getting a guy like that, I think, definitely helps them out. NBA free agency continues. The Sixers with about $9 million left to spend. We'll see if Daryl Morey can get creative with it. Check out The Real Mike KB on Twitter, and of course, right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. MKB, thanks, my man.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Always good to catch up with him here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. That's MKB, our Sixers contributor, formerly of CBS Sports. I think that the NBA offseason, which got up to a bang, needs a little jolt in it. What could happen next? Well, one of the things is the Summer League. The Sixers Summer League, kind of interesting. Jeff Dalton, who, by the way, had NBA minutes this year with the Sixers. Ricky Council, he's playing in the Summer League. David Jones, who they signed as an undrafted rookie free agent. Justin Edwards, he's going to be a really interesting guy to watch from Kentucky. He was a number 3 recruit in high school. He was like the 3rd-rated high school prospect coming out. Was kind of disappointing in his one season at Kentucky. Jared McCain, the draft pick. R.J. Hampton, he was a first-round pick. Adem Bona, 2nd-round pick. Tony Bradley is on the Sixers Tony League team. Summer League team. Romeo Langford, a former first-round pick. So some interesting Summer League guys that the Sixers have, and the Summer League starts the 12th? Is it the 12th? I think it's the 12th is when they get the Summer League going. But some interesting names on the Sixers Summer League. I'm a big Summer League fan. I love the Summer League. I got to get out there one year. All right, more Sports Bash coming up. Big 3 on the way. Don't go away. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
It's
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
5:31 Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. We've got Phillies tomorrow against the Cubs. 1:30 the coverage on 97.3 ESPN. Saturday against the Braves. 6:30 on 97.3 ESPN. Time for today's Big 3 with Josh Henning. My producer's got today's Big 3.
Yes, being brought to you by Boxing Insider Promotions. The boxing event of the summer, Mike, is Friday, July 26th. We're undefeated junior middleweight Justin Figueroa of Atlantic City will be back in action, along with top-rated heavyweight Otto Wallin, up-and-coming fighters like Marco El Tiburon Romero and Absegami High School's Bruce Selden Jr., all inside Tropicana Atlantic City's showroom. Get your tickets now at Ticketmaster.com for Friday, July 26th, the boxing event of the summer, presented by Boxing Insider Promotions.
And the Phillies lineup is brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage, Rio Grande Moving to Breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage, Stott, Turner, Bohm, Castellanos, Sosa, Merrifield, Pache, Rojas, Marchand. Wheeler's on the mound tonight. By the way, Turner is the DH tonight. Bohm is at first base. Sosa is at short. Merrifield is at third. Pache is in left. And Rojas is in center. So you got a lot of guys kind of all over the place tonight. for the Phillies and the Cubs.
Don't forget it's Imanaga going for the Cubs tonight. So that's why it's a little bit of a different look. No Dahl, none of those lefties in the lineup.
No Marsh.
Mike. No Marsh, correct. So,
no Stubbs.
Are you happy to see Stott getting a chance at a lefty?
I mean, he generally plays every day. I don't think they were like straight platooning him. I think they were just while he was struggling a little bit. Look, they also had to try to find ways to get Sosa, Merrifield. I know Merrifield is not high on everybody's list right now, but they've been trying to find ways to get those guys. And when Stott was struggling, I think there was more reason to say, you know what, let's give him a day off against a lefty.
Do you think that
now? But by the way, now with Schwarber being out and needing a leadoff guy, I think Stott has become the leadoff guy in this situation. So his days off against lefties have been limited.
Would you like to see Castellanos stay in that cleanup hole instead of putting Marsh back there when he returns to the lineup? Because Castellanos is much more of a natural guy to back up Bohm than Marsh is, right?
Oh, man, that's like...
I know it's not a simple answer, but I mean, I'm just thinking ahead to when you go to teams like Atlanta, and Atlanta's going to look at Alec Bohm and be like, we're not afraid of Brandon Marsh.
I don't think they're afraid of Castellanos either.
Probably not, but at least Castellanos is more of a threat, isn't he, than Marsh?
Look, get well soon, Harper. Apparently he's running in the outfield today.
I saw the video of him running last night, yeah. And Real Muto was taking batting practice already, live batting practice.
Well, there was an update on when all these guys may be back, and I think they said when for Schwarber about the 9th was
that's when he can come off the list, yeah. So
right, but that he's going to be ready to come back on the 9th.
Which if that's true, that's great news.
Of course, yeah. I mean, much want to hear that rather than he won't be ready when it's time to come off. I did see a list of like when all the guys are like kind of anticipating to come back and play. Let me see where did I find that list? I don't know. I'll find it.
Well, while you do that, I want to get to this one story. So, Mike, last night, the largest WNBA attendance since 1999 was when the Indiana Fever traveled to Las Vegas to take on the Aces. They had to move the game into the T-Mobile Arena.
Did they move the game ahead of time, or
Yes.
was it like earlier in the day? Like, we have such a, you know what I'm saying?
No, this was planned out ahead of time.
Gotcha.
But they didn't expect.
I was wondering about that. Like, I did see that it moved there, but I was like, is this just like the walk up for this game was so big that you're like, you know what? We're going to move this across the street.
No, they planned this days, actually a couple weeks in advance.
Well, I have seen a lot of the Caitlin Clark games. They have been moving to the NBA arenas.
Right, like Washington had to do it.
They didn't do it in Chicago.
They didn't do it in Chicago. But so this is also the largest crowd in T-Mobile Arena history. So it's not just one of the largest for WNBA. It's the largest in the T-Mobile Arena history.
Is that where the Vegas Golden Knights play?
Yes, it is. Also where UFC has their fights at. So Caitlin Clark versus the Aces drew more than the 2 years ago Stanley Cup champions and UFC fights when they're there. 20,366 people, Mike. Caitlin Clark fever, no pun intended, continues.
Hey, man, if you get the opportunity, Philadelphia obviously doesn't have a WNBA team. You'd have to go to like the closest being New York or Washington. But I would say if you can get a ticket to try to check out one of her games just to see. I heard the energy in that place was amazing last night, just unbelievable. But good for her and good for, I'm interested to see where this goes. It's almost like, every so often, 4 years we talk about like what's going on right now with the Copa America, the American soccer team lost. I didn't even feel the need to bring it up because, quite frankly, I think American soccer has been a complete embarrassing joke, and this just exemplifies what I've been saying for years. Just nobody cares. That hopefully she can do what the soccer crowd hasn't been able to do. Keep people interested and not just have it be like the soccer thing comes every 4 years, and then they just kind of go away. And every year it's like, oh, this is the year, and it never happens because just nobody cares. I mean, I hate to be that harsh about it. Just nobody cares. No. And you could say, well, people care. No. I will contend if people cared, you would care about, like the MLS would be a major, huge thing.
Correct.
You care more about Premier League and international play than you do about. That's like saying that
and the TV ratings show that, by the way.
Well, and that's like, well, the TV ratings for MLS, they don't have a TV deal. They're on Apple Plus.
That's why they're on Apple TV Plus.
Well, they got a boatload of money, to be fair. So.
It helps.
Well, I'm just saying, like, the reason they're on Apple Plus is because they got a boatload of money to go there. So, but my point is, you could ask 10 American soccer fans, what do they care more about, the MLS or Premier League or whatever, any international league? And 9 out of 10 of them, or 10 out of 10, would say, I would watch a Premier League game. That would be like asking somebody, hey, do you want to go watch an NBA game or a European basketball league game? And nobody would give the European answer. And that's just where that sport is. It's not its fault. The other countries are way above us on that. They care a hell of a lot more. But everybody outraging about the fact that they lost to Uruguay, by the way. How many people live in Uruguay? 6? And all 6 of them play soccer, and all of them are better than the 300 million people we have to choose from. Nobody cares. Like, nobody cares. I get it. It's a great, youth sport. People play it. There's a lot of people playing it. It just is not something people care about. I didn't even know that they were playing the other night, to be honest with you. When they lost the game to Uruguay, did not even know they were playing.
You heard more about them losing than them about them playing.
Well, I heard the outrage from people about them losing, and I said, outrage? Nobody cares.
Well, the outrage was more so because of the horrible offsides, Carl. That's what it was more so about. It was a blatantly obvious offsides, and it's like, great, we lost because the referees.
Listen, I saw more about the fact that the camera angle on the game. By the way, 3 million people live in Uruguay. There's more people that live in Newark. Think about that. Seriously.
They can borrow some.
Seriously. Uruguay is a country of 3 million people.
Right.
And they just beat you in soccer.
Correct.
Or football.
Football.
It's like the point where I'm like, every so often when the Team USA loses, just nobody cares.
Well, back to the Caitlin Clark.
But my point on that was people, hopefully, this can expand that sport and grow that sport to where people do care. And it's not just this, because people were wondering what was going to happen after college. Were people going to follow her in the WNBA? So far they have. Is that going to continue?
I think it will, because to me, she is to the WNBA what Tiger Woods was to golf. She is this shooting star that is lighting up the entire sky, and she's not fading anytime soon. She's only going to get better. It's not like she's going to have 1 year and never play again. It's not like she's a tennis player who eventually is just going to get too old to play tennis. It's not like she's a figure skater or a gymnast who, once they get to a certain age, they just can't compete anymore, unless your name is Simone Biles. I mean, goodness sake, she's 28 years old. That's the exception to the rule. She is going to keep getting better, and we've seen women like Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird play to their 40 years old. So you could argue she has another 18 years ahead of her to keep doing this. So that's why, to me, I think she's a little more Tiger Woods and not Michael Phelps, per se.
Hope so. Listen, the amount of people who do care about what she's doing is fascinating. That she's selling out arenas. They're following her all around.
Yep.
These people are coming to see her. They're not going, it's like, now, what's the attendance for other games that don't involve her?
I mean, the attendance is up overall, but it's nowhere as high as
that's what
Caitlin Clark
like.
is.
How long is this going to sustain where they follow her around and keep watching her? And will it help the other teams.
I mean, attendance
in the league.
is up in non-Caitlin Clark games in the WNBA. But the problem is that they're not always in like the T-Mobile Arena or what's the name of the arena in Washington? I forget the name of where the Wizards play. But like the WNBA teams are not playing in those arenas every night. So there's only so much of a ceiling they can get to in those non-Caitlin Clark games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not like the Liberty are playing in Madison Square Garden, the Barclays
I would
Center every
contend, though, as harsh as I was on the soccer, I don't think anybody cares who wins or loses these games.
You mean the games that Caitlin Clark plays in?
Right, the WNBA games. I would contend at the same aspect, and that's where can the sport grow and will this continue to grow if nobody cares about the results and the outcomes? At what point do you just say, okay, I've seen it, all right. You know, that's what I'm interested to see next.
That's going to be an interesting question. Does the sport grow with her, or does the outside interest of the non-diehards or the people who don't already watch the sport, do those people start caring, like you said, about who wins the championship?
I will say I have seen like a game or two when they've been on TV, but sometimes they're on Prime and I don't know that. But I'm not going on my way to watch. And when I have watched, I have been intrigued. Like I have been they played Chicago the one day, I guess, what was it, like a Sunday afternoon, maybe
Sunday early afternoon on CBS.
Yeah. So and I watched, and I was kind of like watching the game. But I'm interested to see where that goes.
Well, the reason why I said speaking of Caitlin Clark is because UFL executive Daryl Moose Johnston gave an interview today to Fox 4 in Dallas Fort Worth and said Caitlin Clark is one of the factors for why their football league did not have as good of attendance as they hoped for this year. According to him, he says they, for as good as the TV numbers were, he says they had record TV viewership this year for what was formerly the XFL/USFL. The UFL, he said, suffered because he felt there were in a lot of places people were more interested. He said, quote, people were more interested in watching Caitlin Clark play than our football players.
Well, there are certain things that go viral and they fade away. So far, Caitlin Clark has gone viral and has been able to stand the test of time. Listen, she has been on the map now going back to when did the college basketball? November?
Yeah. By the way, for those who are wondering, UFL averaged 13,512 fans per game, but their TV audience averaged almost 1.8 million viewers per game. So an extreme gap between who's watching on TV versus who's going to the games. Now, Daryl Moose Johnston said it wasn't just her. He also blamed...
I thought the ratings were pretty good, though, for the UFL.
Well, I'm saying they had great TV viewership, but the attendance was poor.
Gotcha.
It was way below their expectations, he said. He said it was frustrating that as people are following Caitlin Clark around, that people wouldn't give the UFL a chance, even though they're watching on television. They wouldn't go to the games.
Yeah, I mean, now, correct me if I'm wrong here. Well, the UFL or what was it called beforehand?
Well, it was the USFL and the XFL.
The USFL played in
Birmingham, Alabama.
They all played their games there.
Correct.
Everybody. The XFL did play in home stadiums.
Correct.
Did this one play
They followed the XFL model.
They played in home stadiums. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that definitely, I can't imagine. How many teams are in that league? 12? 10? 10?
I thought there were 12, or it's either 12 or 14.
Well, listen, I love going to a game, and I would go to a game, but I can't imagine that being a big draw. Like, hey, I'm going to go to the UFL game and go. That's a one-time thing. Like, hey, I'll go check it out one time kind of deal.
So
I can't see those games ever sustaining attendance.
So I was off. It was 10 teams, actually.
10.
And
there was 5 and 5. They did 5 from each side, I think.
Yeah, and the idea is that by the end of the year, only 8 teams were really in competition for the postseason. They're hoping to expand, but Daryl Moose Johnston said it's going to be hard to expand. Let me read the quote exactly. He said, "In a competitive environment, when you talk about all the spring sports, is going to be hard to expand if we cannot grow the attendance and we're only growing the TV viewership.
Well, a lot of people have wondered about the viability of spring football. And there you go. I mean, listen, for me, if the Philadelphia Stars had a team here, are you going to a game?
I'm more likely to go watch Caitlin Clark play.
Okay.
I'm with a lot of the fans.
Right.
I would go to a Caitlin Clark game over a UFL game between the Philadelphia Stars and your boy Beck's St. Louis Battlehawks.
They love them down there.
St. Louis does love their Battlehawks.
Yeah. Well, they lost their football team.
They did. Mike, we combined multiple sports all into the Big Three today.
All right, there you go. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform, getting ready to roll out tonight. 4th of July tomorrow, we'll have the Phillies and the Cubs, which, by the way, I see a buddy of mine just tweeted. Read this real quick for you. He says, Cubs tickets are insane tomorrow. $130 after fees to sit in the bleachers. Feels like there's got to be a ton of traveling Phillies fans for it to reach that price, even on July 4, the way the Cubs are playing. $130, I don't feel like is even that exorbitant. Like, is that now to sit in the bleachers? I don't know. Like, bleacher seats out there generally like cheap.
Yeah, from what I understand, the bleacher seats are usually cheapo seats.
Like $130, like it's ridiculous for $130 for a ticket, but still. 4th of July, Phillies are in town, and he's saying that that's kind of like shocking.
Demand is there. People want to go watch the Phillies on the road.
4th of July trip to Chicago to see the Phils. Sports Bash, wrapping up the show, coming up next.
You're listening with Mike Gill.
Never thought this radio stunt would catch on so big.
On 97.3 ESPN.
All right, getting ready to wrap up. Hopefully everybody has a safe and happy 4th of July. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. We teamed up with Seize the Deal for an incredible offer on restaurant gift certificates. This week, the big deal, it's a $50 gift certificate for $25 to Romanelli's in Galloway. The deal goes live at 9 a.m. on Friday. And you can also get a $50 gift certificate for $25 to Bright Spot Cafe in Sea Isle. The deal is live 9 a.m. Friday. That's your spot, right? The Bright Spot. Where Kelsey was the other day?
Kelsey and Bo Allen, yeah. They went out there. They had breakfast. And I'm actually going to have Shannon Brower from Bright Spot on tonight to talk about what she made for Kelsey and Bo Allen.
How about that? All right. I did not know that.
Now you do.
That was not planned, by the way.
It's good radio symmetry by you.
Tomorrow, Phillies baseball is on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage starts at 1:30. You can hear all the action on 97.3 ESPN. We got a baseball doubleheader tomorrow.
Yes, we do.
Followed, the Phillies and the Braves is a I don't know who's playing. It's the Braves. It's not the Phillies and the Cubs. It's the Braves and the Giants, right?
Braves and Giants,
yes. Is the second game. So some National League East implications. Friday, we'll have the best of the Sports Bash on Friday. Show will both be off on Friday. So we'll be back on Monday. Have a safe and happy 4th of July, everybody. Hopefully the traffic's not too bad. That's all I ask.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
That's it. Josh has game night coming up next, and I'll talk to you guys on Monday here on the Sports Bash, live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 97.3 ESPN.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.